Miles Rose. That statement's good. Put a smile on your face.
Let me start this one.
How are you? Good. Good to see you. I like that blue jacket. I like that blue jacket.
Yeah, the whole sound.
I see.
Okay, good evening. The date is June 23rd, 2025, and the time is 6:17. I hereby call to order the workshop of the City Council of the City of Groveland, Florida. Jenny, could you please take the roll?
Yes, Mayor Keith Kehoe.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Gaines.
Here.
Councilmember Amy Jo Carroll, absent. Councilmember Judith Fike.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Radzik.
Here.
City Manager Mike Hine.
Here.
City Attorney Anita Gerasi Carver.
Here.
Sergeant at Arms Chief Sean Ramsey. City Clerk Virginia Wright here.
Thank you. And we have a quorum.
Mr. Mayor, should not be a need, but I will be monitoring my phone call, monitoring my phone.
Understood. Thank you. Utilities overview and budget, Mr. TJ, or should I ask the city manager to ask Mr. TJ? Okay.
Economy of time.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. TJ Fish, Director of Transportation and Public Works. We have a whole team compiled in front of you this evening to present the utilities budget. It will consist of a couple different presentations that we're going to combine together. I'm going to serve in the staff role to tie some of this together. I did want to introduce the team first. From Woodard & Curran, we first have over our operation and management project. We have Ben Von Hars, who joined us back in March from Missouri. So Ben, thank you for being part of the Groveland team. He'll be presenting the Woodard & Curran portion of the operations budget in just a moment. Accompanying him is Rich Niles, who's presenting the other portion of the budget, which is the overall utility plan, including a lot of the capital projects related to both existing needs and growth. So Rich Niles will present that. Our client manager with Woodard & Curran, you all know Justin DeMello, who is here at the table with us. I did want to acknowledge that we have Glenn Burden, who's the area manager for Woodard & Curran that oversees Florida projects, including Groveland, who's on the front row, and Bree Morales, who is able to join us here in Groveland. She's over Woodard & Curran Southeast operations, including all the Florida projects. She is also with us this evening. And then, of course, from finance, we have Pam Brzonski, our finance director, and April Allman, who's our budget manager. And then sitting on the front row is Aaron Jers, who is not only deputy director, but also over utility billing. So the full team is here to answer. And let me emphasize right off the bat, this is a very different flavored presentation than a lot of what you've heard in the mini workshops. And this particular one, what I want to emphasize is that we are dealing with the enterprise fund. So enterprise funds are very different because for those of you that enjoy when government does get to actually function like a business, this is that time. What goes into the fund is what is allowed to be spent out of the fund. You need to balance that out and make sure you're not unnecessarily subsidizing into general fund only what makes sense, and we'll point a few of those things out, including the way we handle personnel. And understanding, please, that when we talk about enterprise fund, the two primary revenue streams, in addition to the great grants and low interest loans that we sometimes get to enjoy, it is really about the rates that the customers are charged for water, sewer, and reclaim services, and it's about the impact fees collected by the new growth that's coming into Groveland, where we want to ensure that growth is truly paying for itself. So as we go through the various aspects of the presentations, keep that in mind about the enterprise fund, how it's completely separated purposely and legally from the general fund, And we will get through first the operational part, which is, again, Woodard and Currens. And let me frame this real quickly. We are now entering year 7 of the contract. This is their 7th year as project manager. You'll hear a little history of when Woodard and Curran first joined and partnered with Groveland on this. So when we walk through this from Ben, you will hear the basic summary of the exhibit that is annually provided as required by the O&M contract. April will be able to give the context to the more complete enterprise fund budget. But when it comes to the operations through Woodard and Curran, that is the focus of this initial presentation. And then as we move into the second part, I'll give a little framework on that as well. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Ben, and he will walk you through about a dozen slides involving Woodard and Curran's O&M proposed budget for year 7, FY26.
Good evening. We'll start with our highlights of our presentations. We'll be covering over the City of Groveland water, sewer, and reclaim operations. We'll look at the operations and maintenance budget, as well as the operation, maintenance, and managed capital projects. And then we'll have a time for some questions there at the end. So City of Groveland, the contract was initiated in 2019. At the time it was initiated, the city had 25 staff members. When Woodard and Curran took over, the staff was reduced to 19 to run it efficiently as we possibly could. The area is 55 square miles is the service area that we cover. At the time of the contract, the estimated population was about 18,000. Current population is right around 26,000. That is a 44% increase in the 7 years. Currently, there are 21 team members. We started initially with 19. We're up to 21 team members. And in the 7 years, we've only had a 10% growth with our staff. The American Water Works Association, AWWA, they recommend a staff size of 40 for the service area, for the services that are provided, and I'll get into more of those services here in just a second, and for the level of customer service that you want your customers to have. Right now, it's the 40 is on a lower level, where if you wanted a higher customer service, we'd actually have to add more staff than that. So that's the recommendation by the American Water Works Association would be for a size of 40. We're currently doing it with 21. Let's give you by the numbers what we do. We have customer service. We have 11,261 drinking water customers, 4,279 reclaim, that's your irrigation water, and then 7,709 sewer customers. Our staff completed 5,263 service orders last year. Those are the customers calling in with various items. Last time we read over 15,485 meter reads. And then we have non-pay disconnects that our customer service takes on. That can range from 55 to, the most recent one, we had 320 disconnects that we had to do for non-pays. Now, this is manual. We go around, we shut everybody off. That's on the list, and then we turn around and have to turn them back on. So that's very time-consuming. For our utility locates and inspections, we have one individual that completed 2,822 locates last year. We have another individual who does our new construction inspections, and he completed 604 new construction inspections last year. He also manages the locator. So those two individuals have very full plates, and they are go, go, go every day. We also take care of the FOG, which is your fats, oil, grease, and your industrial pretreatment program. We have one individual that is reviewing commercial plans for making sure that they're putting in grease intercepts. Restaurants, we're catching the grease so it doesn't get into the sewer system. And as far as our industrial, making sure that the chemicals that could kill our plants are being caught. Various items are being caught before they get to our plants to do damage to the plants. The individual also does site inspections and enforcement for the pretreatment program. So they're going out inspecting the different grease traps, the different mechanisms that are in place at these businesses to catch the bad stuff before it hits us. Our wastewater facilities, we have 64 sanitary sewer lift stations. These are out there in the neighborhoods that gather the water and push the water to other lift stations and finally to our plants for treatment. We have 2 wastewater treatment facilities for combined 1.98 million gallon capacity. We have the Sampe plant, which currently the Sampe plant is 109% over capacity. Now, people think that means we're having an overflow. In reality, that is the design capacity, that is what it was planned for to make it work at its optimum. At 109%, we still have a safety factor, where our safety factor generally is 1.5%. So we're already into our safety factor. That would be like storm surges, water getting into the system, just overwhelming the system. That's our safety factor. So we're at 109%. We've gone from 95% to 109% in 6 months. So we're definitely seeing a lot more water here in the last few months, and it's growing month to month. We're seeing an increase. The Sunshine plant is currently at 55% capacity. Now, there is a project to reroute one of the force mains to direct flow from Sampe plant to the Sunshine plant. That will relieve us about 100 to 120,000 gallons a day. You take that out of the Sampe plant, you're still about 99% capacity. So there is some relief, but you're going to put that in the Sunshine plant, and with the growth happening up on the north end, it's going to go beyond capacity real quick. We have 3 reclaimed storage tanks that we maintain. We have 46 miles of reclaimed water main out there. Our sanitary sewer collection is made up of 68 miles of gravity sewer main, 39 miles of force main, and we have 5 miles of the vacuum system. This is your water side system. This system is where we're seeing is a high cost as far as the labor that it takes to maintain it, the materials, the amount of materials we have to do to maintain it, keep it running correctly, and of course, it's a high liability to the city, as we've seen recently with the issues we've had out there in the last couple weeks. Our staff also maintains 1,827 manholes. As far as our water distribution facilities, we have 5 water storage tanks, 8 water wells, and 1 booster station that we maintain and operate. Our water distribution pipe and valves and hydrants, we have 151 miles of water mains, 1,058 fire hydrants, 1,975 valves that we have to operate and maintain on an annual basis. For our contracts operation and maintenance budget, fiscal year 2025, which is year 6 of our contract, the budget was $4,385,269. The proposed fiscal year 2026 budget is $5,302,982. That's a difference of $917,712. Now, we looked at the Raftella study that was done by the city last year, and the proposed Raftellis put the increase, showed an increase for fiscal year at 2026 at 24.7%. Our proposed budget has only an increase of 21.2%. The Raftellis study also showed that there would be an increase of 4 staff members in 2025 and 4 more staff members in 2026. What actually occurred is in 2025, 2 of the staff members were added. This would be our assistant project manager and our lead wastewater operator. Those were added in 2025. The 2 other positions were deferred to 2026. Our labor makes up about 1/3 of that increase. We are $297,000. This includes a 4% increase for staff and market salary adjustments for our licensed operators. In addition of 3 staff members as of October 1st, 2005, and an addition of 3 staff members on April 1st, 2026. The first round of staff members will be our FOG and our Industrial Pretreatment Program Coordinator. which we already have on staff, is being paid by Woodard and Curran Overhead currently. This will roll them into the project, the actual contract. The other positions will be a maintenance technician, which would be a maintenance person who's going to perform maintenance on pumps at the plants. Could be various mechanical issues at the plants and the water treatment facilities that this individual will maintain. And then our utility technician, this is one of our field service positions. These guys are the ones that are out there meeting the customers at the doors, handling the different customer service calls that come in, doing a meter reading. So that's a very needed position for us. The round two, we will add a lead operator for just our water plants. So we're going to have our lead operator will focus on the wastewater facilities, and then a lead operator will focus on the water facilities. We'll also be adding another plant operator just to make sure we have appropriate coverage for all our plants and not having to use outside sources to help us maintain compliance. We will add a second maintenance technician as well, which will allow us to have additional staff to be able to maintain these plants and these lift stations when they need help.
I'd like to add some context here to make sure it's clear to council. Again, this is an enterprise fund. So based on the growth in the customer base, you're supposed to keep pace. That is what we're proposing. And what you are experiencing as you look at these numbers, let's give some historical context. 25 City of Groveland employees moved from City of Groveland to Woodard and Curran in 2019. 19 of those survived the cut and remained with Woodard and Curran. So 19 now doing the work of a staff previously at 25. We have stayed at 19 for 5 years through year 5. Year 6, this current budget year that we are now in, you saw the addition of 2 positions added to the project. So that position 1 was October 1st. The second position was phased in at mid-year, and so that's now been added. There were supposed to be 4, not 2. So why do you see 6 proposed? Because we're already back into catch-up mode. And I need to emphasize this because there's a theme. A big decision was made by the City of Groveland Council last year to adjust the rate structure and to adjust impact fees even more significantly. We have not reached a point of fully realizing that new rate structure. It's happening month by month. We see the ticking upward of the revenues exactly where Raftelis said that we should be. That's the optimistic news. But we're still not collecting the revenues in hand to be able to say we can add 6 positions at once. So even the 6 proposed in FY26 are phased, with 3 entering October 1st, the other 3 projected to be added mid-year. And again, that's based on the revenues doing exactly what we're describing this evening, which is to keep that upward trend. So I wanted to give that context. And I'm sure there are other questions, but that is a very significant portion of why you're seeing that delta from year 6 to year 7. Good. Next slide.
So we're going to look at a couple of our highlights of what some of the things that changed in this year's budget. One of the bigger ones we have is disinfection and chlorination. Now, this is an important one. The decision was made that to get rid of the gas cylinders at our water treatment plants, the chlorine gas for safety. We have up here at the park, the ball fields, there's a tank there that had chlorine gas, and the safety issue was to remove those from there to protect the citizens. So we did that at our water plants at 1 and 2 to be able to remove those gas containers and switched over to sodium hypochlorite. Sodium hypochlorite, it does cost more than the gas chlorine, but the safety factor is what we're paying for on that. So there is a $22,000 increase on that. We do have equipment rental. We do have to occasionally have to rent a lift for performing elevated maintenance. This is new for us, so we went ahead and threw some money in there. When you look at our budget, it's going to be a big percentage from 0 to 2,500, so that's why it's thrown in there. Hand tools, $8,500. This is the purchase tools for the additional personnel and equipment and equipping new vehicles. Rich will get into the new vehicles as part of the capital, I believe. Sub-instrumentation, $31,500. This is the installation of a redundant SCADA server. Our SCADA is what controls our plants. It's the computer programs that are controlling our plants that are alarming us when issues are going on. So we have one, and have a second one in event of power failures, power surges. You know, if the SCADA goes down, we don't have control, so we needed something for redundant. We have increased equipment surge protection, as I mentioned, and our SCADA annual licensing has increased. So with the number of SCADAs we have, you know, we have to pay for the number of outlets that we have, and of course, everyone's raising their prices too. So we have our sub-mechanical is up $19,000 from prior year. This is our annual fire flow testing and maintenance, as well as our annual load testing and inspections of our 5 plant generators. These are the large generators at each of our plants that run our plants should we lose power at them. They haven't been load tested in a while, and they should be load tested annually, where the whole plant is put on a generator, run it. They run a weekly test where they just start, but we need to make sure it'll run the plant when it's under load. So we're going to start performing those on those 5 plants. Sludge hauling is up $48,000. So sludge hauling is the dewatering and the removal of solids from our wastewater plants. These are the solids coming in that we have to get out of the plant, and they get hauled off to a landfill. So we have, with the increased growth in the area, we're seeing an increased amount of loads of solids coming into the plant that we have to remove. So this is reflective of removing those solids with the growth. Our sludge tipping fee, the $15,000. This is the first sludge hauling is just out of the plants. This sludge tipping fee is what we have to do to get the solids out of our lift stations. We separated it so it's easier for us to track. This is cleaning the lift stations, getting the solids out of lift stations. This is getting the solids and the buildup out of our headworks at the plants. So this is definitely separate. And then we have other chambers that we have to clean out regularly of solids and where the solids have built up. So that's what this one is. Outside lab services is increasing by $20,000. This increase is due to our fats, oil, grease, and industrial pretreatment compliance, as well as our next year is our lead and copper water sampling. This is still required by DEP, even though the EPA we've met that EPA for the lead services. DEP still requires us to do the lead and copper water sampling at this time. Until the laws change, we're gonna have to do that every couple of years. So next year is that year, so there is additional sampling that has to occur. We have an increase of $7,000 for maintenance agreements. These are the increased costs for residential, commercial backflow prevention programs, as well as our ground tank storage inspections and our annual maintenance of our plant analyzers that we have to bring in a third party to come in and test and make sure we're in compliance, we're calibrated, and providing the right numbers to DEP. Another operational increase is our travel expenses, $3,500. This is the increased travel for engineering and technical support for the plant upgrade projects that's going on. We are going to have to bring in staff more regularly for inspections and make sure everything's going the way it's supposed to be. Vehicle insurance is increasing by $12,400. This is for the addition of 6 vehicles for fiscal year 2026. To go with that, the diesel and fuel is going up as well to $20,500 going up beyond. Additional for the additional 6 vehicles. Uniforms is $8,800. This is additional personnel to help cover the additional personnel, but we're also seeing uniform costs increasing, and with the steel toe safety clothing that these individuals wear. So we do have the 21 staff, so we'll have 21/7 staff that we're figured for uniforms for next year. Going to touch base on some of our O&M capital projects that were completed by our staff here that were not contracted out, that were completed by Woodard and Curran. One of the first things that we completed was our arc flash evaluation. This is where they go out and evaluate all our lift stations, plants. We're looking for anywhere that there could be an electrical area where electricity will arc, hence the arc flash, from a unit to a person or from unit to unit, something like that. So they're looking at evaluating these and making safety recommendations for repairs and replacement. We completed a water plant 3 and 5 pressure blow-off modifications. These, if the pressure gets too much out these water plants, it will relieve pressure. We've completed 6 hydrant replacements as part of the hydrant replacement program. We replaced the ground penetrating radar locating equipment, which to help locate the sewer lines, water lines that are buried that don't have any way to trace. In that very first picture, when I had the title, after the title, that was our locator using that ground penetrating radar. We have lift station rehabilitations at 2 of our lift stations. Lift stations 3 and 11 were completed this year. We completed the chlorine gas to sodium hypochlorite conversion at water plants 1 and 2. We did start the conversion at plant at Sampe as well, so we're starting to supplement sodium hypochlorite in lieu of chlorine gas. We're still trying to balance that out before we get rid of the chlorine gas. We also completed the installation of chlorine analyzers and the Silver Eagle reclaim pump skid. That's just you bring in a whole system, you drop it in place, pumps, to be able to pump the reclaim out. As part of the critical asset inventory for regulatory compliance. Our SCADA system, that's improvements at lift station. That's the software used to talk to the different lift stations. It was installed at 5 different lift stations this year. We still have a number of them out there that don't have any SCADA on them. So, the only way we find out if there's an issue is if people call saying the light's flashing or they hear this horn. So we still have a number of lift stations that need to have SCADA added to them. And then, of course, our favorite waterside point vacuum pit SCADA installation. This is an ongoing project. We're still working with the contractor. The SCADA here is more, it's going to tell us when there's an issue at a pit and exactly which pit has the issue, so that we're going to get faster response to that particular pit. Currently, if we have an issue out there, we have to pop every lid and walk all the streets to be able to find which pit has the issue if we're not getting a call from residents saying they're having an active backup. So that's going to save us a lot of time and to be able to respond and get things fixed before we do have backups in houses. So that's still ongoing, and hopefully we can get that wrapped up soon. We got some anticipated projects to be managed by O&M. We have the flow meter installations and replacements. These will be at our water plants. These flow meters are required by DEP to be able to get the data, the flow data that we need for the consumptive use permit. That the consumptive use permit is how much water we're allowed by the state to pull out of the aquifer to supply the people. So we have to be able to show accurate data. Some of our areas don't have meters on them currently. Some of our lines, some of them are so outdated that there's no way to calibrate them any longer that we have to replace them so we can get them accurate and be able to get the right numbers for DEP. Lift station generators repair. This slide calls out 3 lift stations, but we've actually, lift station 17, 30, and 51, and we've actually recently completed lift generator repairs of lift station 30 and 51. Lift station 17 generator still needs to be budgeted. It's an extensive repair that needs to occur to that, so it's operating. Lift station 38 repairs. Lift station 38's got it's an older one, it's got a lot of corrosion in there. A lot of the wastewater creates hydrogen sulfide, which likes metal and likes to eat up metal. So the idea is we'll go in there, replace the piping inside the wet well, the lift station with new piping, and replace some of our hangers so they're not as corroded and it's going to be more dependable. Lift station control panel rehabilitations. We have 3 on the list, 5, 8, and 10. These are some of our older ones as well. A lot of the components in them are outdated, can't be replaced with modern day, so we need to do a rehab of the system. Some of the components are so old they literally crumble in your hands, the guys tell me, and it creates a safety issue that there could be potential electrocution in these panels. So our guys have learned which ones to work around safely, and those are the ones on this list that we're trying to get taken care of first. We have our hydrant replacement program. We'll bring that back. for this year, trying to replace some of our older hydrants that need to be upgraded. Auto samplers at the wastewater treatment plants. These are samplers that will pull samples in. We program it, set it, we program it. We're not doing dip cups. We're able to program and grab during times that after hours. It'll tell us exactly what's going on in the system as the system's working. So MRX meter reading equipment. So an MRX meter reader is the device that's used to read the Neptune meters, the new meters that are going in and the meters that we already have out there. We currently already have one MRX meter reader. This device isn't just a little belt clip. This is one that rides in a truck. It's got a big antenna. It can pick up meters faster and farther away than the little ones that you wear on your belt clip. We can pick up more meters quickly as part of it. We do have one. In the event that it breaks down, we have to send it to Neptune, and it can take up to 3 months to get it back. So we need a redundant meter reader equipment. This also allows us, currently when we meet readers, our guys start at 3 a.m., and they're out there reading meters until 10 p.m. With the second meter reader equipment, we can have our guys out there and doing it in half the time versus just one guy doing it from 3 a.m. to 10 p.m. Another issue that we're going to take on will be lift station bypass pumps. Several of our lift stations do not have generators. What we have is the bypass pumps, and we have 12 that are earmarked to have the bypass pumps installed. We're going to do 4 a year for the next 3 years. We're going to start with lift stations 9, 18, 19, and 21 for next year. Sorry to run through it pretty quick. Are there any questions?
I do want to use, if I could, real quickly, the context that we showed you some numbers about staffing. I mentioned going from 25 Groveland employees down to 19 Woodard and Kern employees. We've grown that to 21. The American Water Works Association is an organization nationally that we utilize for best management practices and developing metrics and performance measures. According to their numbers on the size of the Groveland systems of having 5 plants, 4 of which are operational, 8 wells, the fact that you have 2 different wastewater plants, 2 different reclaim plants, and you've got 26,000 people, you should have 40 people on this team. You have 21. So I want to emphasize that we are doing more with less purposely, and as we develop this budget, just as last year, even with the rate structure, and bear in mind, everything that you just saw is tied to your existing customers and the rates they pay, all of the operation and management of the systems. Based on all of that, we really should have more staff, but we continue to be conservative and not growing staff too quickly, even in the proposed budget. It's add 3 in the new budget year, with 3 more to follow at mid-year if the revenues support that. And we have to coordinate this issue with the finance department to ensure the revenues are there to offset the expenses as the enterprise fund requires. So with that context, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Frederick, do you have questions?
I'm going to start with a comment about those rate increases that we experienced last year. And for those who may not remember, we hadn't raised rates for quite a few years, and it was done out of an abundance of being conservative because we didn't know what was coming out of the ground for the longest time. There was a lot of shrinkage. So how can a council increase rates, even though it was preordained at 3% per year? How could we go ahead and raise rates when we didn't have a good cost structure? So we kind of lost track of, we should have been increasing something, but we couldn't sit there and do it without getting accurate data. So a lot of questions I'm going to have here has to do with data, okay? So that is why the 40%. We found out after the fact that there was water that was being wasted out to Sampy, and I believe it was reclaimed, and we didn't know why it was off spec. And then we found out that it was one of the neighbors, okay? So we found that out. We replaced pumps or gauges at the wells. So we've done a lot to get our hands wrapped around things. And with that said, so we're going off and we're getting these Cadillac water meters, Cadillac version, okay? tell me, what am I going to get out of this that I'm not getting out of my ones that I've got now? Where is my incremental value on this?
Mayor, council members, Councilmember Radzik, we'll get deeper also into the capital projects in a moment. We've just shown you the Woodard and Curran operations budget so far. So certainly the AMI water meter project, which stands for Advanced Metering Infrastructure, that project, that investment in the city of Groveland. So this is not handing these meters over to customers. They're our city of Groveland meters that we use to measure and make sure we charge equitably, fairly to all of our customers. The big improvement is the infrastructure that comes with it, that we'll be able to read in real time by radio frequency all of the meters, saving incredible labor on the meter reading process, and more importantly, the rereading process, which often takes 3 steps total, including right now manually reading up to 1,000 meters a month that are failing. So all of that becomes archaic, part of the past, and we have the ability to achieve that data in real time quickly, saving not just time, but money for our customers and keeping those rates maintained at a reasonable level.
I'll keep my questions to the operations, and then we'll go over the budget. But the one thing that I do want to say, when we start talking about these meters, there's been some discussion that I already paid for my meter during my impact fees, and now we're looking for the customers to pay for new meters because the city wants to upgrade them. I mean, that's just a fact. There's no disputing that, okay? I paid for it as part. Matter of fact, I paid $850 for my irrigation-only meter 20 years ago. So I don't think we can put our head in sand and sit there and say, oh yeah, that's not true, Mike. Well, it is true. I got paid, it was paid during my impact fees, and now we're basically asking someone to pay for them again. How much shrinkage do we currently have out of the ground? Do we have any idea of how much we're losing with regards to sales for any reasons?
Are we talking about water loss, sir? Yeah, we absolutely track. It's part of our monthly audit process of what do we pull out of the ground, what do we distribute treated from our water plants, and then how does that compare to billing? Best management practice is to be in that 10 percentile of loss not exceeding typically 10%. We have been as high as in the 30 percentile, dropping into the 20s. Now we're back at a much more manageable, reasonable amount in the teens. As we change out these failing meters, and that's the point staff will emphasize, this is not a preference. This is an industry standard. When you're over 10 years on a meter, you know that at a minimum, it has at least slowed and is performing less quality than when it was new. So you have a fiduciary responsibility at some point to have a replacement program, just like you would with any of your infrastructure, whether it's at the plants or in the ground. So with that said, it's an investment in ourselves. And again, we're protecting our customers to be able to charge rates that are equitable to all customers without having to do these major increases because we didn't invest in ourselves for a period of time.
With the new plant coming online at Sanpete soon, hopefully, what does that mean for the 40-acre spray field? Do we still need all 40 acres?
Yes, you still need all 40 acres, Mayor, Council. The reason that is the permitted new capacity when the plant expansion is complete has the disposal requirements. The spray field is right now the primary method of disposal. However, in the utility master plan, we have some alternatives that would require additional investment, but could eventually lead to a day where we could say you have an option instead of the spray field.
Okay. What are we not able to do right now with the shortage of the, how many positions are we short? Yeah.
If you go by American Water Works Association, there should be 40 team members on that team.
So what can't we not currently do because we don't have additional 3 or 6 or whatever?
I'm going to let Ben speak to the realities of day-to-day operations.
Currently, a lot of the staff that we're having are, meter reading. We'll take meter reading, for example. When we have the missed reads that we have to go out and reread. We had 1,700 last month that we had to go out and manually read. We had 8 staff members, and we had to hire in an outside contractor to come in to assist us, to give us bodies, to be able to have enough to go read all these bad meters. So we had 2.5 days that we had 8 staff members out there. That's all they did, is read meters for 2.5 days. So that, another one, we had Waterside would be an example. Not having enough manpower to get around to look at 245 pits fast enough before we ended up having backing up in houses. So our guys are working a lot of overtime. We've got operators that we're having to bring, overlapping and working extra hours. We've got a lot of, operations, lift stations. We have 64 lift stations out there. Ideally, we'd be able to get to each one every week. Now, we're not, with as much as we got going on, it might be every 2 weeks that we got someone out there on site. But having the manpower be able to have us get to these lift stations in a more timely fashion. So.
With the new meters, are we going to be able to shut people off remotely versus having to get out of the truck? Or are we still going to have to get out?
Not with these meters, we'll still have to get out. Yeah, and that's the other thing. We had 320 disconnects this last month. We had to break it up over 2 days in order to get everybody off. So, and that was our full staff of 8 people out there doing that.
With the backflow, who's responsible for ensuring compliance from a residential perspective?
So that is something that we're still working with the city on. We do have the program that is tracking when the backflow is in, and then they're sending out the notifications. We are still working with the city on the compliance issue, making sure everyone stays up with that.
Last point is that the city now has our own diesel and other gases. You projected an increase in that. Is that with being able to maybe going and getting the diesel at?
That would have to be an agreement we'll have to work out with the city. At this point, we are still getting our diesel separately. They're using that primarily for your other first responders and city vehicles.
Now and then, maybe we can work something out. I'll save the other questions for later because they're more.
Thank you. Mike asked about the difference between the 19 and 40 people. I was going to ask what deficiencies we have, and I appreciate your response on that. She said now we're paying overtime. We're bringing in an outside contractor. There's cost differentials and so on. So is there a number applied to what the overtime, the contractors are, and how that might equate to applying that then to a full-time position that comes in to help bolster where we're deficient in that 40? I mean, there's got to be a number there. I don't know if it comes in the next presentation or not.
We can pull that number together. I don't have that number with me today.
Okay. I was just curious how that would compare. So some other questions. You said that we need a second MRX meter, did you say?
Correct.
What do they cost, just out of curiosity?
About just under $16,000.
Okay, thank you. The station control panels, you said they're being rehabbed. What's your time frame on having those completed? I mean, it sounds like it's a little bit timely, but I mean, is it 6 months, 5 months, a year? What's the time frame we're looking at on that?
Generally, we can get them completed within 6 months. It's once we have approval on the budget to be able to purchase the necessary equipment.
I'm going in reverse, as you can tell, so. No, I was back to the deficit of employees. I hit that twice. I think that's all I have for right now. I'm going to let some other questions come up, and these might dovetail into that, but thank you again for your responses. Appreciate it.
Mayor, to answer Councilmember Fike's question a little bit more thoroughly, when you see overhead as part of the Woodard and Curran budget, when they do need to bring in someone that's not necessarily staff, but they have the expertise to help with the situation, and that may be a Florida person, that may be from another state, that's coming out of that overhead budget.
Okay, thanks, TJ.
But can I just jump in here? Where I'd like to dovetail on that is that if we had in the budget labor cost, not numbers of people, we could then know how much overtime, how much of these add-ons would be. To Ms. Fike's point, then you would know if you could just go ahead and pay for another individual. That's the discrepancy when we talk numbers versus cost. I can't take numbers to the bank. Cost is, so it would be very helpful to understand what that is, because the business decision could be, I know we'd have employee benefits and everything that have to be rolled in, but it could be that just by looking at what we're already spending, you get closer to that 40 if we're already doing it by Band-Aiding the right amount of people.
Yes, sir.
Just a couple questions. Harping on the number of team members, obviously 19 is a huge gap. Obviously asking for 6 is less than a third, so yeah, great, let's do that. But my question is, with the new meters, does that alleviate some of the pressure that your current employees will have? Like, does that help?
It should, but at the same time, we're still going to have failures or failure to reads that we will have to go out and manually read. Hopefully, it's a lot less. We know a lot of the older census meters that are being replaced as part of this AMI project were a big part of that, but we still had several of the Neptunes that do fail to read, and they're electronic. They fail, and eventually, and
Is it always the same ones, or is it just sometimes one just randomly doesn't?
just one randomly does just fail. It just it could be the electronics or the battery's gone dead, and they're supposed to, and what we do is we do the ones that do fail early, we do send them back to Neptune and get a replacement for it. So.
And then for water side, like, are there any other options to replace that system, or are we just stuck with it because it's already infrastructure in the ground?
It's a two-sided.
Sure it is.
Sadly, you're stuck with it because it's already in the ground. You can right now. I mean, we've talked with TJ. We might be looking at another vendor that does these to see if they can come help us, or at least give us an evaluation. The current vendor, the system's failed, and it is problematic. The only other thing would be, I mean, you would have to spend millions to swap out that kind of the vacuum system, and that's not, fiscally responsible at this point.
Yeah, you would have to replace the current system with grinder pumps throughout, and we're talking 530 homes. And so the investment that's being made now, that we're continuing to hold the contractor accountable, is putting the SCADA monitors on every one of those vac pits, which serves at least 2 homes apiece, sometimes 3 to 4. So that alone is at least a learning so that we can avoid disasters, that would be associated with the backup into a home. So that investment is significant and is allowing us better response time. Rich?
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. So when we originally envisioned this project, it was to improve service so that we didn't have backups, so we could, target the problem rapidly and avoid impacts to the customers. So that was a $250,000 project 3 or 4 years ago, and now it's over $500,000. Just cost inflation, equipment's more expensive. It's a multi-million-dollar investment to rehab and turn that into a force main system. The proposed out parcel for development in the future, which is I think 60 units, 60, 70 units. Our engineering teams reviewed that application, and we've said we don't want to extend the vacuum system. So we're trying to avoid extending the problem. We're trying to manage it the best we can. And when we look at the capital plan, we'll talk a little bit about kind of other priorities. So we have to prioritize these projects and investments by the city, and that is an operational challenge. We did break out a separate line item in the capital plan to just point that out, that there's equipment that is becoming more costly to replace and maintain there. As the city improves the asset management program, we will be able to hopefully better track the true cost of maintenance and repair. And that's something that, just as of recent with the project, it's been a significant workload for the O&M team, but we do want to capture that going forward so we understand that cost of service for that particular area. And then the city can decide whether there's further investment at some point that would be appropriate.
Thank you. And one more question, just to clarify. Even though I pay like an impact fee and I get a meter, meters are wearable parts, right? So they have to be replaced periodically, no matter what we do.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can I dovetail on Amy Jo's question just for a moment? Because I had written here, with the new meters that we're putting in, what is their lifespan? What's the time frame that these new, readable meters before?
So the new meters, the battery seems to be the thing that fails the most. They say it's 20 years. We haven't seen, they haven't been out there for 20 years yet for us to be able to say. But the battery life is supposed to be 20 years. Typically, a meter's 10 years is your life cycle. They do get built up on them. There is debris that gets in them, and it slows them down. Slowing it down means it's not spinning as much, it's not catching all of your revenue that it should be pulling, so.
Okay. And just a quick question on that as well. With the new meters going in, I know it's supposed to give us a real-time, real read, so that we were talking about this months ago about not reading in arrears and getting and I think you alluded to that earlier, TJ, about getting the correct funds from our residents. So I know you said we don't know the full impact. It hasn't been a year since things have been going on since the increase. But have you seen where those meters have made the difference that they're supposed to in the billing of real-time, real value?
Yeah, those of us that are familiar with the industry and other customers, other utilities, we've quietly had a level of excitement that revenues have clearly improved since the rate structure went into effect October 1st. But when the meter change-out program is complete, understand that today there are still 4,700 old census meters that are all more than 10 years old that are in the ground.
Okay.
So all of that's being changed, and you're now going to be charging people accurately. We have a substantial number of customers that we do not have data off of those meters, and the only thing we can charge is the base charge to be connected to the system. So they're not even being charged actual usage for that portion of the census meter owners. City of Groveland owns them, but users. So I say that because you're going to see an impact, and that is why it's so vital that we communicate with our customer base, and why these door hangers, and why the text messages, and why the news releases and everything that we put out is be aware. The new meters accurately charge real usage, and we have these conversations one-on-one with our customers. This is what was happening up until now, and now this is what you really use, and it's an education process. So I offer that because it's something we take very seriously as we deal with our customers, is that's a very important of charming customer service, is to be forthright and transparent.
Thank you. And one final question, I think.
Councilwoman, may I have my turn?
Yeah, I mean, we go around
Oh,
once,
I'm sorry, I
and
was
then
just trying to
please.
finish up with Amy.
No, we'll go back, but
Okay,
let's
thank
get
you.
through
I
everybody
apologize.
at once. Go ahead.
How many fog systems does Woodyard and Curran service in this area?
Currently, he has 36 that he's currently servicing, but he's also doing reviews with the new commercial sites, as well as repeated meetings and inspections with them. One of the big ones that I know, with Kroger, he's been out to Kroger a couple times, Niagara a few times. There's repeated issues that require him to make repeated stops. And then he's out with all the new development as well, with the new commercial developments, checking on those new systems.
Okay. I have, in addition to being the vice mayor of the city, I have a special interest in District 3, particularly Waterside. As you all know, there have been some ongoing issues there. I want to know who has access to the vacuum systems at Waterside, turning them on, turning them off, and I would like to know also if there are any policies and procedures in place for these vacuum systems.
So currently, we are the only ones that turn on. It's on. We do keep it on unless a vacuum pump goes down. So it is on all the time, basically. We have three vacuum pumps that continuously run, that are set to continuously run. We always have one running. So we do have a redundancy. So they are left on. The issue is when, I think you're seeing that when we had these failures, we had, a week and a half ago, honestly, 40 failures in 7 days. And with that, I mean, our guys, we kept the pump station on, so it's sucking, it's pulling the vacuum in the main lines, but the individual units are where the failures occurred, where the contractor had done some work and made some changes, and these units had failed. And as far as policies, procedures, our guys, they have procedures on the way that they do. They try to track down when there is a failure out in the system. And a failure would be a vacuum loss. Generally, it's a valve that's stuck in the open position, so it's allowing atmospheric air coming in. We're not building that vacuum. It could be that a pipe popped off inside that vac station. Not the vac station, the pit. So anything that breaks that vacuum. And that's where we're seeing a lot of these failures that came up as that vacuum was broken. So what our guys have to do, there is a protocol. They start at the station, and they start their way working out to try to locate that area. They isolate valves to try to build vacuum up, and if they notice in that area, if the vacuum can't build up in an area, they start walking all those pits. We had 40 in 7 days. That we may get 1 or 2 a week normally where we have an issue. We had 40 in 7 days, and these guys were out there working around the clocks. We had guys working a day shift and guys coming in working a night shift just to try to find these. The repairs just are timely as well. So
I am specifically talking about, I believe the vacuum system was turned off, and a bill was like 100,000 plus. That is specifically what I am talking about. Who has access to the system? TJ, can you explain it to me?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, the question, let's get out of the way the vacuum pits, which is wastewater related. I think the concern about the billing at the Waterside Point HOA was related to water and water meters. And at this time, only the city of Groveland is to access the water meters. I cannot speak to if anyone has accessed. There's an investigation still underway as to what may have occurred with touching any meters that are only to be touched by City of Groveland personnel. And that investigation is not concluded, but we have reason to be concerned. So with that said, I'd like to stop there and share that with the city manager and council when the information's complete.
Well, okay. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, when this gets fixed, will there be policies/procedures that says only the city of Groveland can operate, function, whatever the right term is? Will there be no question about who can and who can't? That's what I'm asking.
Yes, ma'am. In fact, I'll say that that is currently already legally required, that it's to be City of Groveland personnel only. And sometimes it's not a matter of creating the law, it's a matter of enforcing it. And that's why this is an investigation.
Okay, so would there be an investigation? Do the people at Waterside know this? Those that are in control, do they know that it is only the city of Groveland that can do this?
I will say that I can't speak to who may be involved and who knows what, but I can tell you that legally it is to be the City of Groveland only accessing those water meters.
So how will you reiterate that only the city of Groveland can operate this? Just in case April doesn't know. April's at Waterside, she's on the HOA board. But just in case she doesn't know, is it a bad thing to reiterate it? Is it a good thing? Is it not necessary? Help me understand.
Understood, Vice Mayor, Mayor and Council. I think the answer is it's always good to reiterate when we see a need to reiterate what the law already requires. And now that we've had some experiences with the Waterside Point neighborhood of questioning what has occurred at a couple of meter locations, it does seem like an optimal time to inform the HOA and the neighborhood of the legal requirements.
And one last question. If it's budget time for everybody, and we all have a mandated list, we also have a wish list. If you prioritized the list that we saw that was presented here tonight, what would be number one? And if you didn't get number 17, what would those two be?
Sorry, are we referring to the list of items that are to be done?
Yes,
By
sir.
O&M? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So these projects are capital projects that are in the capital plan. The operations team, Ben's team, would implement them under his existing budget. So the labor associated with that, management of it, if it's contracting a vendor or ordering equipment, they take care of that within their existing workload, essentially. These are capital projects that are funded through the capital plan, most of them at least. So when we get into the capital plan portion of the presentation, I'll show you where we budgeted for existing projects. Some of these are to be done this fiscal year, and some are FY26. So they're relatively small numbers compared to some of the other projects, but we'll show in the capital plan where that is budgeted separately from Ben's budget, or
Okay.
from the O&M budget.
Sorry. Would
We've prioritized them as well, yeah.
you do prioritize them, so I'll see that here tonight? Okay, thank you.
Hey, thank you. Just to help me understand, the 40 staff members that we were told we should have based on the size of our community, is that based on geographic size, or is it by patrons that we actually, because we're 55 miles, but more than half of that's water.
Correct. It is by your service area because it does take time for us to get to those different areas. It takes in your service area, it takes in your number of customers, it takes in the number of facilities you have and the manpower that needs required to run those facilities. It looks at your, how many customers, potential customer service work orders you're going to have, as well as your new construction with your locates.
Okay, so I'm a little slow here. So is it based on area or based on number of people that are accessing the system?
Yes.
Yes, it is both.
It's primarily based on service connections. So number of connections typically reflects, a number of miles of pipe, et cetera. So it's kind of an aggregated number that is used based upon data for systems across the country. So American Water Works Association is they develop these metrics, and so they're a metric that is based upon providing a certain level of service. We want to provide a high level of service, so it's a recommended number for that. Now, the operations team we like to think that we're pretty good at it and that we have additional value that maybe we don't need as many people as that number 40. But as the system has grown, we're trying to keep pace and add people. And some of that is budget constrained. So if we had more revenues and more budget, there's a lot of challenging priorities. And in the capital plan presentation, we'll show you, here's some of the things that if you had additional staff, this is what they'd be doing. Right now, there's 6 hydrants were replaced. We recommended 20 per year in the master plan. We don't have the revenues to fund it, let alone the staff to actually do it. So until that money is available to do hydrant replacement at the level or valve replacement for the distribution systems, critical valves, et cetera, some of that can be done by the operations team. Some of it may need to be subcontracted. Until that cost can be budgeted for and paid for through revenues in the financial model, the staff could be doing other things if they had the equipment to actually install. So there's things that we'll get into in the CIP presentation that'll kind of speak to what additional staff could be doing, things that the system, kind of preventative operation maintenance, industry standards, we should be doing best practices.
Okay, and when you get into that CIP, I'll ask you the question, does anybody, because I know you're in a lot of communities, does anybody base their labor based on the revenue they take in? Does anybody have that as a metric? Also, fire hydrant replacement and upgrade. What do you do to a fire hydrant to upgrade it?
You're digging it up, taking it off, putting on a new one. The valves inside wear over time. They're just old. They're corroded. There could be a weep hole that's just not working correctly anymore. They seize up from being old. So you're digging it up at the foot of it, removing it, and putting a new one back in its place.
What happens to those old ones?
They do get scrapped.
They get scrapped, okay. Nobody rebuilds them? No?
We do pull parts off them if we can use the parts for hydrants. If like an ear's broken or a cap's broken, then we just need to replace. We can't pull parts off those to help.
Okay, and then my last question would be, these are all assets, right? The fire hydrants, all the stuff you were talking about that would crumble up in your hand when you take it off. Do we depreciate the assets? Do you fund depreciation in your enterprise fund? Because we know they're all going to go bad at some point.
It's not funded as a budget number, but it is reported in the financial statements, the depreciation. And fire hydrants are usually not considered assets because the cost of a fire hydrant is below the capital threshold.
For all the fire hydrants, it's below the capital?
Individually, because they don't all fall apart at the same time.
That's interesting. So we don't fund the depreciation as the answer to my question. We recognize depreciation and let it hang out there. Is that what we're saying? We don't fund it. So we don't fund we know that these things have a lifespan of this much time. Do we fund that time so that we aren't going back and taking out a loan or doing something else down the road?
Fund capital projects and repair and replacement type functions each year in the budget in lieu of funding depreciation. So they have funding for fire hydrant repair and upgrades each year. They have funding for various different infrastructure upgrades and stuff that's part of the budget.
Very cool.
If I,
Yes.
if I could, Mayor. So this has never historically been funded. So the short answer is it's never been funded. When we developed the master plan, we looked at the age and number of hydrants to be replaced to try to get to a sustainable level of replacement on an annual basis, and there's a backlog.
Yeah, I don't want to stick on hydrants. I'm just asking about depreciation. We have pipes, we have all kinds of things that are tremendously expensive, right? And maintenance and repair doesn't quite get us to the place that we need to be, in my own opinion. I'm just asking on these assets, because we know they're going to be replaced. I think we call it depreciation, you call it a sinking fund. That's right, it's a different word. But do we have a sinking fund based on our new rate structure and all the stuff that with the Rascalis or whoever it was, did we put in that whole system any kind of sinking or fund to replace equipment?
At the moment, the closest that we are coming to that is the aspiration that we have to a 10% based on operations of renewal and replacement. That's how we would capture, for example, fire hydrant replacement. But we haven't been able to achieve that 10% just yet. We're still experiencing the growth in the revenues to allow that.
Okay, and why I'm saying that is I know I've worked for some companies that do their own infrastructure and stuff, and we would have, based on the date when these pipes were put in the ground, we would have what we call heat maps, right? That we know that these are going to only last this long, these, and so we knew weeks or months and years ahead that we had to have this much and this much that would come out of that fund in order to replace them before, as a lot, I think I'm seeing we replace something when it busts, and then we go in and replace it rather than doing ahead of the game. And then we're talking about your overtime, working all this and all that, but I just don't know if we have that heat map, if we have the depreciation, if we know what we need from year to year to year over the 20-year period.
Yeah, so we did in the master plan, look at it, not in the same financial perspective that you're saying, but we looked at it, what Pam was saying is we have line items in the capital plan to address those items. So hydrant replacement program, valve replacement program, we have pipeline replacement with certain projects, and they're better defined because we know, this is phase 4 of the downtown ductile iron and cast iron water main replacement. So we have specific projects in there. We did look at the more critical assets like lift stations, and so we looked at the age and condition of the lift station, looked at the age of the pumps. We also looked at whether that lift station would require an upgrade due to growth that's planned or already approved within that area, so we don't just rehab it and then have to then swap the pumps out and upsize it 3 years later. So kind of what are those triggers and thresholds? So for the real critical, larger assets like lift stations, we have those. The water treatment plants, obviously the wastewater treatment plants. Pipes are just kind of those things that, you want to replace proactively. We don't have the revenues to do that now. We don't have the revenues to replace critical valves. When we budgeted, and I'll show you coming up, it's all next episode. But there's a lot of items so we've kind of tried to capture that in the 20-year plan to get to that replacement and renewal budget that's appropriate.
Okay, we don't have to go into it if you're going to go to it later, I'm sorry. You can just say, hey,
okay.
we're going to get to it later from now on. Do we want to go back around?
I got 2 questions. Actually, blue jay tailing instead of doves, because I don't like doves. So if a utility is enterprise fund is supposed to be self-sufficient, we should have some sort of earnings, restricted retained earnings or otherwise. At some point, I suspect when we get to the budget portion, we're going to see what the retained earnings are, and that should be pumped back into the utility. We are not putting anything out to the general fund by way of net income, correct?
There's a required by your own code 20% reserve fund that we have to meet, and we don't touch it. It's a reserve fund.
Okay, all right, so the other question had to do with going back to Waterside. Who designed that system? And are they being held accountable for that system? Because it seemed to me that we've had a problem since day one.
In the first decade of the 2000s, the developer is the one that proposed and was allowed to put in that system, and it was turned over to the city of Groveland thereafter, and we have all inherited that system from a maintenance standpoint.
It's fine.
Thank you. That was my question. Is Waterside Point the only area in Groveland that has this pit system? Okay, shaking of heads, yes.
Yes, and it's the only community we have, especially a community of 530 homes, on a reclaimed sand mine.
Yeah, and I was curious, may I, and I don't know if you know the answer, what made that so attractive to the builder?
We can't speak to that.
Okay, and finally, last question about that, and I'll be done. And I appreciate Barbara asking about the responsibility for the pumps, and you said that there is some, recourse of you can't touch the pumps. Are there signs there that say, under penalty of law, you can't touch this pump? Do we have something like that by the pumps so that people would see some signage alerting them to that issue?
No, and for clarification on this particular issue, we are literally talking about the same type of water meters that every customer has in the ground outside of their home. That's
Okay.
what's been possibly touched.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I'm done.
Great, moving on.
Move to part 2 of the presentation, and we'll wait on IT to switch over. We hit them at the last moment with some updates, so they're going to pull up our capital improvements planning. So utility management and capital planning, and Rich will take this one away.
Is your mic working? I'm sorry, is your mic working there?
Oh, yeah. You need,
I do enough talking for everyone, so that's usually. All right, well, so that was, we just to recap, we went through the operating budget for operations. And so we've been working closely with the operational team and TJ and to look at the overall utility management needs and capital planning, master planning. So we kind of wanted to recap the process and sort of how the city has shifted in its approach to management and the history of where there wasn't a lot of planning, let's say next to zero. So before TJ stepped in, there was no map, and we started doing mapping when Woodard and Kern came on board. Some examples of that, kind of getting to a level of being able to do the planning and then financing. And the city has a lot of need. So we want to kind of capture what is the need for the infrastructure, the existing infrastructure, and then look at the budget more precisely for FY '25 and '26. Or do you want me to?
The only thing I want to add on this one, it kind of speaks for itself. 54 square miles, basically 6 miles wide, 10 miles long. What's really unique about us is that we, for a city of our size, have 2 wastewater plants and 2 reclaim plants and 5 water plants with a 6th one to be built. And everything that you're seeing on that graphic is based on the adopted comprehensive plan and the land use element. So we are using that as the basis for all of the utility master planning. This is just to give historical context, and then, Rich is going to let it roll from here. But basically, 2018 was a significant year that there was a leadership change in a way that some things were approached. And there was a lot of concerns in 2018 and 2019. There were problems the council was consistently facing from its customer base, anything from water breaks, water boil alerts, 81 days of reject water having to go to the spray fields just during one fiscal year. So all that began to change as the city, vetted some options. What should we do? Should we sell the utilities? Should we outsource? Well, the decision was made to utilize Woodard and Curran for operation and management of the systems. They were brought in October 1st of 2019. That year, there was a first-time adjustment in several years to the water and sewer rates and to the impact fees, and that really allowed what was needed all along to commence in 2020, which is utility master planning. And it started first, before we even look at growth, what are the existing needs at the existing customers? What are those needs in front of us immediately?
Yeah, so as TJ mentioned, in 2019, in 2019, the current understanding of needs were related to wastewater treatment capacity and inadequate facilities, meaning just antiquated facilities, antiquated due to age, technology. So we have aging facilities and technology needs and improvements. So these were things that were known at the time until we did further study and we identified additional needs as well. And this is when contract operations began. So Woodard and Kern started to kind of look under the hood and say, what other infrastructure needs do we have? And the city issued an RFP for master planning. Woodard and Kern was selected. In 2020, we started that planning process. At the same time, operations was kicking up. And we started to really look at asset management and get an understanding of the system, where it's located physically, the condition of it, the condition of critical assets, and take these larger identified projects and needs and start to get them into a planning process for funding for planning, design, construction. And then we'll go through those key projects that are underway now. So what TJ referenced was a system that was struggling to meet compliance, and we were able to enhance performance of the existing facilities, work with what we had, and to the point where the city received a Plant Operation Excellence Award for SAMPE.
I did want to mention we purposely used this particular award that was provided by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection for operations of the SAMPE wastewater plant. And the reason the team received, the city of Groveland received this award, is it was recognized how we had managed to squeeze the last life out of this antiquated plant right before commencing the upgrade and expansion of the plant. So that's much to the compliments of the operations team.
And I think it says a lot from a compliance standpoint when DEP looks at how you're managing your facilities and if you're asking for improvements and upgrades that are needed, and the confidence and the ability to operate the system. So in 2020, we initiated, and I think council has seen these types of documents and facility planning documents. These are SRF program-related requirements. So you basically develop a plan document to evaluate existing needs and then how you're going to finance those needs, so that you can borrow money through the SRF program, the State Revolving Fund Loan Program for clean water and drinking water. Clean water, just as a refresher, is wastewater and reclaim systems, so it's a little counterintuitive. And drinking water is pretty straightforward. So those plans.
I want to emphasize there's two great things on this screen here. One of them is, what are the facilities plans? And Rich was just explaining, drinking water is exactly what it sounds like, and I'm glad they're cleaning the dirty water. I mean, that's what wastewater reclaim are. But also the graphic. It's timely, because City of Groveland is putting in our first lower Floridan aquifer wells right now for plant number 6. So those will both be fed drinking water source from the lower aquifer. And we have one also now at the Sunshine plant to help augment the supply of reclaim that consistently runs out at that plant. So seeing that lower aquifer tapped into, that is exactly what the City of Groveland is doing now for the first time.
So those facility plans, they require adoption by City Council. They were adopted in January of '21. And so since that time, you know, the city advanced those projects through design. And it takes time to design and permit these projects, and then secure funding for construction. So in a relatively short amount of time, in about 4 years, the city has secured a lot of projects for these capital needs. So these original projects that were envisioned in 2019 are coming to fruition now. And that's a pretty reasonable, if not somewhat aggressive cycle to get projects of this magnitude. So it's something that I think the city has done very well to secure. Council has supported, you know, funding and the strategy for these projects. And these are, again, the most significant needs that were identified initially. Now, at the same time, we wrapped up those plans, those facility plans that looked at primarily existing needs, some modest growth just based on, you know, you build a facility, you don't just build it for the capacity you need tomorrow, you build it for something a little bit more in the future. The master plan was really taking a look at all those projects and then looking at the comp plan and looking at what all the entitlements would mean if the city were to serve future development. And some of that future development was already approved. Some of it was in construction. And so those weren't captured in the existing projects unless it were for flows to Sampe, for example. Some of that was part of that. And we created a vision for water utilities that really focused on growth management, looking at all the different pieces of the puzzle, you know, which is it's alternative water supplies, reducing irrigation demand and managing per capita. We can maintain the city's groundwater withdrawal limits in the permit, maintain permit compliance, and then a key part of that is funding. And we need to look at how these projects will be funded and whether that's something that can be sustained. So the master plan was a 20-year planning horizon, but based upon the current needs and a lot of projects identified there, there's a bit of a backlog and just a lot of initial need, and it's a front-loaded, kind of heavy front-loaded program. And that's what we're managing through with this capital plan. So we're working through that. This is just an example in the master plan. This is a graphic that's meant to be difficult to understand because it's complicated. So the city operates 64 lift stations for sewer right now. At the time we did the master plan, we just finished it 3 years ago, there were only 60 lift stations. So growth continues, lift stations come online, and these are city-operated lift stations that the city owns and operates. So typically the developer will build these, they'll build them next to the right-of-way, the city will take over the operation of that. And that's reflected in the rate structure for the fees collected for the rate. Sorry, trying to work with the mic here. When we looked at the future growth, the 20-year horizon, based upon the geography, topography within Groveland, more lift stations are probably needed. So there's a potential for a couple dozen additional lift stations if that development actually occurs. So this is very conceptual level. This is master planning. So we look at these needs to structure an understanding of, well, how do we most efficiently do this with the existing facilities and then leverage growth along the way so that it pays for itself, as well as we do it in a wise manner so we don't avoid having to upgrade things or replace them later on. So it's trying to plan that future, and in the past, a lot of that has not been done in Groveland. We didn't have a master plan, or the city didn't have a master plan 5 years ago. So growth that occurred, one example is Wilson Lake Parkway. We've got 13 lift stations that tie into the same common force main that runs up the parkway from Cherry Lake all the way up to the Sunshine wastewater plant. So that's challenging from an engineering standpoint. Actually, like to think those engineers did a decent job without a master plan. They all kind of designed their own lift station, tied it in and operated it. It does create challenges with the hydraulics and the operation and maintenance of that system. And so that's an example of had there been a master plan, maybe there would have been a slightly different approach to managing that. I'm sorry about that. So lift stations are a significant asset. We have, recommendations for upgrades, planned upgrades that are triggered by development and the need for that. So we did evaluate these assets in great detail. So it is a significant portion of the master plan. At the same time, the utility planning team looked at development agreements as part of that master plan. What are the commitments based upon, the land use and entitlements? And then how are we going to manage capacity of the existing facilities and growth of those facilities and expansion, new projects, et cetera. So we looked closer at the development agreements and existing commitments to see what is really truly planned and approved. What is entitled, and a lot of that area is, within Villa City, that area north of the Turnpike as well. So there's a lot of entitlements there, but we don't have a very detailed plan. The master plan considered the potential there, and we incorporate that into the capital improvement plan from the standpoint of if those projects happen, this is what they would cost, but there's no financial commitment for that by the city at this time. And I'll turn over to TJ in a minute to talk about kind of how we've looked at agreements differently and how, for the first time, I think the city started to look, a few years ago, started to look at agreements, really to evaluate the potential impact and commitment that's in the agreement. So just because there's an agreement to provide service doesn't mean that the capacity is purchased or reserved. And that's a big distinction. So concurrency review, and DJ's, I think, now an expert on concurrency law, right? But we've integrated this into our utility planning so that we understand what commitments we have, what obligations legally are there. And if there are developments that are looking to access capacity and it's not available, then we can write that into the agreement to some extent. And the city has a planned project, for example. They can say Sampe is a planned project. We have it structured so that when capacity is available following the upgrade, then that will be made available. But that has to be purchased. And so for the first time, there's been a shift in how development agreements are structured. And TJ, I don't know if you want to highlight a couple examples we have here and just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I do, and what I want to emphasize is why we're even presenting this as part of the budget workshop is we're giving you an indication of some of the thought that goes into the financial structure that staff and consultants have brought forward that helped inform the rate structure decision, the impact fee decision, and how we're handling development, because the expectation has been made clearer to your staff. We will not be subsidizing. We will make sure growth pays for itself. And two of the things that I can point to that are on this slide that were very challenging for us to inherit are the mascot agreement, which, by the way, dates back 12 years. That agreement was restated and agreed to by the city of Mascot and is a much, much improved business model for the city of Groveland because it committed to capacity and they were just going to pay impact fees as they went, as though they were a developer just building houses. And now they have used grant funding to pay for capacity at the Sampe plant. By the way, capacity that has not yet been built. And that's important. The project that's underway right now is to build that capacity, and some of that is for the city of Mascot. Now, in good faith, the city of Groveland continued to allow a certain level of development occur that did send some flows to Sampe. That's been extremely managed over the last 5 years, and everything has been in the spirit of the agreement. But there was a limit to how much could be signed off on, and until the Sampe plant's nearing completion, what has been approved by the city of Groveland to connect to the system, that's it. So that was one that really took a lot of effort to restructure the agreement. And then Trinity Lakes. That was approved that at a time when the PUD was completely adopted, they had already gotten preliminary plat approval for all 6 phases and then submitted construction plans. So we've known that they have a right to develop 1,153 lots and send water and wastewater. We'll send them water and then we will accept their wastewater. Well, that's what helped us make the decision. We absolutely need to put this force main in the ground to take those flows from Trinity Lakes and send them to the northern plant at Sunshine, where they really should have gone all along. So 2 decisions that we inherited that we've made better. And then the development agreements. To be able to take anything new and say, the new model is you'll prepay your impact fees to get to do your phases. That's a game changer. And there, it's really changed the level of development investment that you're seeing come into the city of Groveland, because it's not fly-by-night. They have to be serious and have a real business model themselves to make this work. So you have several of those, Bright Hill, the Cypress Reserve development, Cypress Bluff, all of those contained prepayment provisions, Rainwood, and then the Villa City PUD, 2,500 acres. With that PUD expiration looming in a couple of years and their development agreement for utilities basically expired, it's given an opportunity to rethink it all and definitely manage, because right now we don't have wastewater capacity to offer them at the moment. So that's something that would have to be worked through. These are properties annexed into the city. They've been given comprehensive plan, land use designations, and zoning. So they have to be legally dealt with. It's just how do you deal with them? And the whole point is we've changed the business model to make it more favorable to the city of Groveland. That was meant to inform, now as we move into capital, the serious look that we took at how many of these projects are existing needs that the existing customers should have a responsibility for, versus what can we use development dollars, grant dollars, to keep the burden off of our existing customers.
So, just to point out on this Villa City development agreement, so there's 377,000 gallons that the city was willing to accept at the time. At the time, Sunshine had capacity, and so the city's commitment was to support their phase 1 of that development and receive wastewater from them. They weren't paying impact fees as part of that, or they're going to pay the regular impact fees, but they weren't prepaying those because the city had capacity. Well, things change over the last 8 years. That capacity is going to get consumed by other developers that have advanced. So that utility commitment was always still there until it expired. So this provision that we highlighted here just shows that within 8 years of the agreement, which was this past January, that commitment expired. So 100% of the quote-unquote agreed upon capacity has now since passed. So that was a commitment that was essentially on the books that overcommitted the city. And so if that had still remained in effect, we'd have another 377,000 gallons per day commitment without a prepayment of that capacity to reserve it. So when we look at Villa City and some of these other larger developers moving forward, we're structuring the development agreement so that we have it's not reserved capacity, it's not committed until they actually make a financial commitment themselves. So the city's not overextending and not building things in the hope that they follow through. So we just wanted to shift gears a little bit and kind of just quickly walk through, for the benefit of some in this room and the public, these are the ongoing projects that are the major capital projects. So when we look at the overall utility budget and CIP, these projects are ongoing. They're financed through SRF loans primarily. Some of them are grants. So we just want to kind of give a quick status. I think we've talked about some of these, like the AMI water meter replacement program and AMI system. This project is ongoing. It's about 18 months. We think in total, 7.1 million funded through SRF. So utility revenues and the rate structure, was designed around funding these projects, that service. Downtown water main replacement, I mentioned this earlier. There is still water main or pipes that are in the downtown that some of them were asbestos-containing material, so that's always been a replacement program priority for the city, and cast iron pipes. So cast iron, typically results in a lot of corrosion, water main breaks and failures. It's aging infrastructure. This is part of the old Groveland, downtown Groveland. So that's been an ongoing program. This is phase 3 of those replacements, and so there's a phase 4 that's scheduled for a later date. And again, funded through SRF loans. We've talked about the Villa City wells and water treatment plant project. This is a picture of the wells being drilled on the right. And this was mentioned a little bit by Ben and TJ, but this was actually a requirement in the city's existing consumptive use permit to go to the lower Florida aquifer to shift your demand. So this is just existing requirements, existing customers, as well as future consumption by new customers to shift some of that demand to the lower aquifer. And so that had to be done by 2025, and we're meeting that schedule with this project. We did originally budget this project to be an SRF loan, and the facility plan was designed around that, and then money became available through another funding source, through SOFI, and the city applied for that, and we supported the city with that application. And it's being fully funded now by a grant, which is a huge win for the city. And so that's serving the existing customers, and it has capacity to serve future customers. And so that capacity is, what's being built is what we refer to as phase one, which is meeting some of that near-term need. And we did those projections for like the next 5 to 10 years of what is going to be needed. That facility supports that. And then after that would be a phase two that would really be driven by any new major development. That's all that would really trigger an upgrade to that. So those new users would pay for that phase two. So it's been designed to accommodate that. And this was also part of a land acquisition from the Villa City property owner to do that. In the future, in theory, it would serve Villa City once they were ready to move forward as well, as part of a phase two or phase three expansion project. The Sampe wastewater treatment plant expansion, I think we've talked about this a fair amount. You can see the funding sources. There's the Mascot grant, which is that $4.95 million grant that TJ was referencing, which was a grant that DEP provided, awarded to Mascot so that they could pay for their capacity reservation at your plant. So they're funding a portion of that through a grant that we were able to help Mascot get, and then as well as a $6.5 million grant that Groveland was able to secure, and the rest is funded through an SRF loan.
And we are monitoring the Florida state budget this week as Governor DeSantis works his magic to determine if our appropriations of $2 million will survive the veto list, which we're optimistic it will. So that could possibly be another $2 million toward this project that would come from an appropriations grant.
So these are significant projects, and I think it's the city. I'm proud that these projects are where they are in the time frame. They are needed. They're very much needed to maintain service and capacity. This project here is funded through the same SRF loan that the Sampe project is funded through. There's also a St. John's Water Management District grant, which is a 50-50 cost share grant. That's just under $900,000. And so these two funding sources are to address a project that is really just immediate needs for the wastewater treatment plant, which is the headworks project to replace the headworks. That's been an ongoing issue for quite some time. It does also strain O&M operations in terms of the level of maintenance needed for that, so that's going to be an improvement. The LFA, Lower Florida Aquifer well, is a new well that was drilled as an alternative water supply, and that was the cost share grant portion. So we have the two Lower Florida Aquifer wells at Villa City. This is a Lower Florida Aquifer well that's dedicated to providing supply for the reclaim system. The reclaim is also, it's the irrigation system. So reclaimed water comes out of the wastewater plant at Sunshine, and then we will pump water from the lower aquifer into the storage tanks and pumps that'll go to the irrigation, the reclaim distribution system, which irrigates that service area. So that project is to provide more water so that we can pump it out of the ground. We didn't have to build a new storage tank, which was one of the former alternatives, which is costly. We got a grant to basically tap into the lower aquifer. And then the pump station upgrade, the reclaim upgrades are the pump station to provide additional pressure for that system. So we need to address source of supply and then pressure to provide better service so we don't have sprinkler heads not popping in the service area, which I think council is probably familiar with some of the issues with irrigation and the reclaim system in that service area.
So when you look at this photo on the screen, that is the Sunshine facility, bearing in mind you have a water plant, you have a wastewater plant, and a reclaim plant all at this location. The drone that took the photos hovering over State Road 19, so you're right in between the two bridges, Turnpike and US 27. And I offer that because the reclaim upgrades are needed because long-term we anticipate continuing to use this facility for reclaim production of that water to send out to our customers for irrigation. So the well is important, the reclaim pump upgrades are important. Headworks is the wastewater plant. That is to buy us time operationally to get as much out of this plant as we can as we near capacity, which we anticipate within 4 years of reaching capacity at that plant. And while we can strategize what are our options, because expanding this facility for wastewater is not a viable option. So we're examining that. We're doing that with you. There'll be more to follow, but I want to emphasize that because we're going to move into additional capital.
So those were the projects that were already, that were identified in the facility plans. Those are projects that are, that moved into construction and that are funded right now. Those are all built into the capital plan and the financial plan. So this is a project that, sorry, I keep hitting. This is a project which we identified as we were evaluating, I'm sorry, I skipped Trinity Lakes. You hired a consultant that can't operate a keyboard, apparently. Sorry about that. So Trinity Lakes Force Main Extension Project, TJ mentioned this earlier. So Trinity Lakes was approved and committed. And SAMPE capacity at the time we did the facility plan was already at 80%. So the future commitments and the pipeline to go to SAMPE would send additional flows from phases 3 through 6. Phases 1 and 2 are already flowing to SAMPE now. Those are built and flowing. Phase 3 and 4 are under construction. And so those flows, the rest of those flows were originally planned to continue to go to SAMPE, and we realized that capacity is not available based upon the timing of the SAMPE upgrades. And so we looked at an alternative, which is to redirect those flows to the Sunshine plant. And so because Trinity Lakes hadn't paid their impact fees, and it was pay-as-you-go, those remaining phases, the impact fees are adequate to pay for this extension project. So they are paying for the pipeline extension to Sunshine. It also gives them motivation because they realize that they didn't purchase capacity, it wasn't guaranteed. So this project offers a solution to their need. And they have we have the financial mechanism to have them pay for that. So we're managing that project right now. Construction is anticipated to be in the next month, we think. Yes. It's a 9-month project, and so we're going to send that to the Sunshine plant. At the same time, we evaluated the Sunshine plant this year and to look at whether it can support that additional capacity, and we identified some issues at the plant. So this is a bit of a unanticipated project. So it's a $1.3 million design, permitting, and construction upgrade to address what we call the clarifier return activated sludge system. And so lots of new fancy terms. But it's basically handling the sludge from the clarifiers. And currently there's inadequate capacity, results in a lot of operation and maintenance need. And this is running at the current plant capacity at 55% capacity. So we can't realize the rest of that capacity, that remaining 45%, which really we should be running at 100, but we can't realize more capacity until this project is done. At the same time, we need to send Trinity Lakes flows there. So we're anticipating the need to do this project first, to time it with the Trinity Lakes Force Main Extension project. We also identified a bit of an issue with the hydraulic flows and the way the pipe network is configured. So we see this as a project that should be paid through by impact fees to realize that full capacity. Because right now it serves the existing customers. This is an improvement to realize that remaining capacity. This is just another project we wanted to mention, another capital project that the city is managing. This is under construction now. This is a Green Valley lift station for the Green Valley Commons development. You just see a picture of the car wash here. So this is under development. The city, when reviewing the site development plan applications, the city decided that this would be better served for this community, or this development, master development, sorry, if it were a master lift station that met city standards. And so through the mechanisms for sewer impact fee, prepayment, and negotiation through the development agreements, the city developed a cost share agreement where cost share is essentially reimbursement of their impact fees that they prepay into it, and then they construct the project, and the city takes it over. So we're in that process right now of construction. We're in current overseas, the project that's being constructed by the developer. And I don't know, TJ, if there's anything else you wanted to say about this project from a kind of a cost share, customer service standpoint. This was a private lift station that is being essentially replaced with a city lift station, a lift station that will meet city standards that will then be operated by the city.
Yeah, we recognized that whenever you have a private lift station allowed to serve what will become multiple properties owned by different ownership, you've inherently created a problem that's just a matter of time to surface. And I'll use a very real thing that happened this past week. We got a call from Wendy's. Yes, the hamburger place. And then we got a call from Taco Bell right next door. They said, what's the city going to do about this wastewater issue we're having? We said, that's not our lift station. It's a private lift station. Contact the owner, who happens to be the same owner of the Walgreens property, who was not having a wastewater problem because they're higher up. So that revealed that one example of just a few out parcels there next to Publix, all under separate ownership, private lift station. Who ultimately gets the call? City of Groveland. So in that case, luckily, they were able to respond. It was a power issue. An electrician was able to repair it. It's functioning now. We saw the same thing coming when we realized 49 townhomes currently use that private lift station there at Green Valley next to State Road 50. You add a car wash to that, they did not have the capacity. And then you add a McDonald's, a Chipotle, a dental office, a Firestone, a storage facility, et cetera. And inherently that was going to become a problem. So city staff brought to you an agreement that the city council approved last year to convert this to a public lift station. Funny enough, we've had another example up on US 27. We have a Wawa and others interested in developing right across 27 from the racetrack. They proposed a private lift station in the original out parcels. Why would you propose a private one when we're willing to take it over if you simply meet city specifications? Oh, it's cheaper. Oh, is it? When we started discussing with Wawa, so you're going to invest in your own private lift station that we don't want, and then you're going to pay all those impact fees too. Maybe we should structure this a little bit differently, because we anticipate there being hopefully a dine-in restaurant, maybe a hotel. I mean, it's a prime location. And that's what your staff and your consulting team is looking at is what's best for the city of Groveland, not for the developer. Even with commercial or industrial, we have to look at it, what's best for the city of Groveland. So there is a real case example with Green Valley that we think we're getting the better outcome long-term for all parties.
Well, and what I mentioned earlier, so that when we looked at lift stations in the master plan, those 23 additional lift stations, so there's some scenarios where it makes sense to consolidate, and we're trying to do that. We're trying to, so the impact fee, the impact fee increase was significant because we looked at those 23 lift stations, we built that into the capital plan and said the cost of building new lift stations is X. And then we incorporate that into the impact fees over the planning horizon so that that is reflected and we have a higher revenue for impact fees on the sewer side to do projects like this in the benefit of the customers. And so it's growth is paying for it, and it's paying for it through those higher impact fees that we anticipated some level of projects and city lift stations that would come online at various places. So a lot going on with those existing capital projects, and so this is a ongoing planning project where the city of Groveland has, is unique in that it has a wastewater treatment plant in the north and a wastewater treatment plant in the south, and there's really two distinct service areas. So we're trying to refer those now as north and south service areas, and while the Trinity Lakes Force Main will essentially interconnect those, we need to look at the capacity and the needs for each of those. Sampe has a planned capacity expansion. It'll go from 1 to about 1.7 MGD. Sunshine, as was mentioned earlier, doesn't have any physical space with the constraints at the site and environmental constraints. It's in some of the areas in a flood zone, so it's highly vulnerable. We're looking at the existing commitments, and so in the master plan, we looked at existing commitments and future plan development within the service area and identified the need to look for a new facility. Now, as part of that planning process, we look at multiple alternatives. We were able to help secure through a SOFI grant $350,000 for planning. We're in that planning process right now. And sometime next month, we'll have probably an update and presentation of the draft plan to review some of those alternatives. So funding secured to date, and again, this is grant money, was $350,000 in planning and just over $19 million in design and construction. Now, that's not enough to build a plant. So the city is going to have to decide whether we continue to access this money based upon the preferred alternative, and that this alternative in the planning phase will be identified and the cost associated with that for that selected alternative And then we'd have a financial plan to, designed to support that, that would be proposed. And so, no financial commitment for the full construction of the project at this time, but we have grant money to do the planning portion of that.
I really enjoy the fact that the city of Groveland was able to strike. We had done the homework, we were prepared, we had everything aligned, and we used a potential threat to turn into an opportunity. That vulnerability of the Sunshine Plant with its location next to wetlands and the potential for issues there, plus the operational issues associated with an aged plant, it led to this SAFI grant. And I mean, to get a $19 million grant for clean water and then a $25 million grant for drinking water out of that same program was just an unbelievable turn of good opportunity for the city of Groveland. So I want to emphasize we are always looking for that opportunity to capitalize, and in this case, it did lead to this grant opportunity.
So that vulnerability is like TJ said, that enabled you and qualified you for that funding, for that grant funding. It's known that plant has limited capacity in terms of expansion, and it's also vulnerable to impacts due to flooding and other natural disasters. So with this facility plan, it's looking at primarily the northern service area, so it's focusing on wastewater treatment capacity and then the associated conveyance collection system for that. In the master plan, need for an additional facility was identified, and the planning horizon was somewhere on the order of 7 years out before it needed to be online to support some of these new flows from planned development. So now that's 3 years ago, so now we're 4 years away from that horizon. So we're going to provide some updated flows and understanding of commitment and capacity. And so what is under construction that's ongoing, you know, Cypress Bluff and Trinity Lakes and some of the existing developments that are in construction, we need to consider those commitments that are on the books, and then what is approved at some level of planning and permitting. And there are some projects that are also planned for construction. And then there's entitlements. So we need to consider what the city's true commitments are within the service area, and then plan an appropriate facility looking at the alternative. So the first alternative is you maintain what you have. In order to do that, the Sunshine Wastewater Treatment Facility it's an aging plant. So there are capital investments that will be needed. We didn't contemplate that initially because we looked at the capacity and need, and it exceeds what can be accommodated there. But one alternative is to continue to manage that, but we'll have city deficiency overall. But we do consider that alternative because we want to look at what's the cost to upgrade Sunshine, which would be the existing customer investment, just to maintain the capacity that's there now. So we look at that investment there. We look at a new facility, and then we have obviously the expansion of Sampe to accommodate the southern facility, and we can shift flows in the interim between the two facilities with Trinity Lakes to manage that capacity. Then what if we were to, excuse me, this is challenging here. So it would be constructing that new plant to accommodate some level of additional capacity, and that's, we think that's probably in the order of 1.5 to 2 MGD, depending on what we think those real commitments are. Not sure what's happening here. Sorry, the master plan identified more flows, but that would be future development, but we're not planning for projects that haven't been committed. So this is back to what is truly the city's commitment. And then the third alternative would be constructing a new facility, maintaining the Sampe capacity, which would be that expanded capacity, and then decommissioning or repurposing the Sunshine facility. So we'll consider these three alternatives primarily, and some variations maybe of that. Now, the one thing that the council is probably aware of is there's 25 acres along Villa City Road that was secured for a facility. That was part of the Villa City Development Agreement, was to provide land for utilities. So in the master plan, we identified this location as being central to development for that particular parcel, but also better serving the city's needs in the northern part of the city. So that's something to consider too, is that land has already been secured and acquired by the city. So that's kind of recaps ongoing projects and some of the planned significant projects. And I'm sure you have lots of questions about that, and I'll try to buzz through the CIP budget and look at the amendment for 2025, and then look at the proposed FY26 budget. Everybody ready to keep going? All right. So right now, there was a bank loan that was funding a portion of the capital improvement plan. And so we refer to this in the budget as the Bank Loan 2023, which is when it was taken. It was a $2 million bank loan, and there's some remaining funding within that that were reallocated to projects that had yet to be completed in the CIP. So we try to reprioritize and reallocate some of that based upon what hadn't been spent. And so there's need that's above and beyond that. I'll get into that in a minute. Utility rate budget, so the budget that's funded by utility rates, revenues that come in. We looked at that budget, and so this is kind of end of fiscal year. What has been really done, what can be done within the remaining funds and projects and timeline for FY25. And so we reallocated about just over $250,000 there. We also then directed and reallocated some water and sewer impact fees to new projects, and I'll go through those changes right now. So the numbers you see in the prior slide match the numbers here if you total them. And I'm just showing you now kind of by category how those projects are a summary of those projects by category. So those projects that about $250,000 are repair and replacement. So Ben mentioned this earlier, flow meters. So when Ben mentioned that they're going to implement projects, they're going to install the flow meters, but they're budgeted in the capital plan here, and that's for water treatment plants 2.5 and the wastewater plants. So the lightning vulnerability assessment that Ben mentioned earlier, we need to make improvements at plant 2. And so that is scheduled for to be completed within the 2025 budget. Lift station 38 repairs, Ben mentioned that, generator repairs, critical parts replacement. So we reshifted and reallocated some costs to make sure that those projects got completed. Now we had a long list of projects that had yet to be done. And I'll more slides. Seems to work better for you, Ben. I think we're wearing it out. Maybe that's the battery life. And then, so a couple existing projects, we shifted some money around there between a couple engineering planning projects. We were able to reduce and delay some of the scope that wasn't necessary to be completed right away, and we reduced that so we can allocate that money. And then there's a couple new projects. We mentioned the sunshine improvements. That was that project that we had up a couple slides ago. And then we also wanted to do some initial planning for State Route 50 utility relocation. As a result of the relocation of State Route 50, we need to look at what utilities within that corridor, at least the higher priority ones, need to be addressed so they can be relocated to accommodate that schedule. And then there was just a miscellaneous project for Villa City observation wells that weren't funded through the grant, so we had to reallocate some money towards that. What we wanted to point out within the existing capital plan is that there was a bank loan that was anticipated to be taken. So it was a proposed loan to address about 19 projects, $3.5 million of projects. So the financial plan was structured such that utility revenues wouldn't be at the level necessary in FY25, and they would pick up in FY26 to pick up some additional projects, but there was a certain number of projects that couldn't be funded in FY25 through the rate, the utility rate. So the city was anticipating borrowing, and the borrowing didn't occur because projects, or because of the, looking at all the other commitments, financial commitments, borrowing capacity, the line of credit for financing all these other large infrastructure projects that we just went through. So that borrowing was delayed, and at this point, we're not anticipating that that's feasible based upon the current revenue. So we're managing those projects and looking at and reprioritizing those, and I'll show that in just a minute. So that's basically a loan that wasn't taken. There was 19 projects that essentially are on hold at the moment until funding's available.
To that earlier question, have you prioritized, there's no fluff. In fact, to keep up the depreciation issue that was mentioned earlier, the renewal replacement, this bank loan originally was a strategy that was basically not going to be able to move forward. So the line of credit that was more desperately needed for the cash flow to do the capital projects that you've already seen tonight. Meanwhile, we have deferred projects that are prioritized. We run off that priority list. We'll continue to use it. I want to point out under water and sewer impact fees, we did budget amounts in case of certain scenarios. Those scenarios did not unfold, so we'll defer that until the next year. But what we did that's a little unique that I want to emphasize is if a developer does come in, and I'll use the Bright Hill example on State Road 19, they're going to extend water sewer reclaim mains that will benefit not just their project but others. Could they be eligible for impact fee credits? Well, that's something that their development agreement references, but is it in the budget? Usually the answer is structure. It has those credits in there. So it's not something that when it happens, oh, did we account for that? Yes, we did. So I want to emphasize that on this slide, that there's a lot of thought going into the decisions that we bring before you. Next slide.
Yeah, so, so just looking at the budget for, that's supported by rates, the capital improvement project list that's supported by rates. So the budget was 1.38 million, and we've revised this, so I'm sorry, this is FY '26 proposed budget modifications. So we revised the budget that'd be funded by rates to 1.37 million, so we're just below that. So we basically just kind of reshaped, reprioritized, and trimmed some projects so that we could fit within the budget that was anticipated. And then we'll talk about, you know, what we think revenues look like as of late and then projected in the future. But the projects that will be funded in FY '26 is this list right here. So Ben mentioned water plant 1 and 2 altitude valves. I think you guys, no, I'm sorry. There's a lot of projects. So this is a project that actually will possibly be supported in part by O&M, the O&M team. But this is essentially to help increase the pressures between the two zones within the downtown. This will help regulate pressure and increase the pressure, address some of the deficiencies that we have for the system there. Critical asset inventory, this is just another line item that's kind of recurring. Auto samplers, Ben mentioned that. Water site point vacuum pit maintenance and repairs, we're budgeting $30,000 for parts. Again, this is something that would normally be captured under the kind of general R&R category, but we felt that this is starting to become enough of its own need that it should be separately budgeted in the CIP. And then we can more effectively track that. We're looking to do lift station rehabilitation for 2 to 3 lift stations. Right now, you know, we've been doing, the operations team has been doing, you know, kind of the bare minimum when it comes to lift station rehabilitation. They're replacing critical parts. They're replacing a pump if needed, maybe the control panel, maybe the rails for the pumps that are corroded, like Ben mentioned. But this is not full rehabilitation, so we're not at the full rehab program, at least historically. This budget for this fiscal year, we're at the recommended level for rehab, for full rehab of at least 2 or 3 lift stations. And we can probably do maybe 3, sometimes 4, depending on those, and those are prioritized. So then security enhancements at facilities. So this is security needs to address risk to personnel with access and gates and keypads and it's also improvements to, you know, with cameras and other improvements in this IT and technology improvements to meet the city's IT standards. So these were kind of enhancements to the existing facilities that have just been there all along. And as based upon some recent reviews and inspections that this need was identified. So we're trying to budget to make sure we address that. It's a pretty important project. Hydrant replacement program, we do have a level of funding in there to do additional hydrants, but it's not at the full level, so we did reduce that budget a little bit. Ben mentioned the MXR meter reader, and then the crane truck for large sewer lift stations. This project is funded in part by the rate budget, but it's also funded partially by impact fees. So as the city has grown, there's additional larger lift stations. These pumps, when they need to be pulled, the operations team goes there with their crane truck, and historically we didn't have a crane truck big enough to lift those pumps, so they have to rent something when they do that. This is to have that available, and it also, based on system growth, there's more lift stations to operate and maintain. This happens more often now, and so we need to purchase this crane truck. This was in the CIP for multiple years, so it's been deferred a couple times already. Just continue. And, excuse me. So there is a project for State Route 33 DOT and the utility relocation costs associated with that the city needs to bear, so that was incorporated into the budget. And then additional planning and engineering support, that's kind of ongoing. And so again, some of these are just continued recurring things. And then water system audit and risk and resilience assessment, those are regulatory compliance engineering assessments. So that's kind of wraps up what is planned within the rate budget for the capital improvement plan. Anything to add, TJ, or you good?
No, we're good.
Okay, all right, we'll keep going so we can try to wrap up and get to questions. So when we look at the water impact fee budget, the 5-year CIP identified, you know, a budget for FY '26 of 2.8 million. And we think that the revised budget is about 2.2 million. And again, TJ mentioned that there's certain projects that are anticipated. We try to, some of this is triggered by growth. So we don't spend impact fees unless we need to. And impact fees aren't collected unless those developments advance. So in some cases, the revenue and finance will be able to speak to that at some point about where the revenues stand, where the commitments are there impact fee credits that are being issued that are anticipated? Those are financial obligations. So if the activity is not triggered, while we plan for it in the budget, it only happens if the actual development occurs. And so we are anticipating that some of these improvements need to be done. And these are all projects listed here that are partially funded, if not wholly funded by impact fees. So you see the same project repeated, like the altitude valves. That's because some of that is driven by growth. We were meeting pressure better 10 years ago, and we think. And so growth is a driver for some of these enhancements. At the same time, it is improving the existing system. So we look at how we can equitably finance through impact fees. And so we're splitting in some areas, we're splitting these costs. The water system audit is another example. Drinking water consumptive use permitting. We're looking at the existing permitting needs, but we're also permitting for future development. So we think that there's a certain portion of that should be paid through impact fees for new development. Not all that cost should be on the burden of the ratepayer. And in most cases, that's a 55%, 45% split, 45% for new development. And so some of these projects I've already mentioned, they're just impact fee supported or funded in some portion. Now we're looking at the sewer impact fee budget. So the budget in the 5-year CIP was 7.2 million, 7.3 million roughly. The proposed budget is 7.1. So we think that there are a significant number of projects, and we've already gone through some of these projects, but I'll mention some additional ones like the Silver Eagle reclaimed water pump station upgrade. So that's a kind of a growing need that was identified in the master plan. It hasn't gone away. That system is able to provide service within the downtown, not downtown, but the southern portion of Groveland. But it does have challenges with maintaining pressure, and it is an antiquated system. But the biggest driver is really new development that's planned in that area, and some of the development that has already occurred, and that has exceeded the capacity of that system. Lift station 18 and 20 upgrades. So those are not just rehabilitation, but it's upgrades, it's upsizing pumps, it's sometimes upsizing the discharge piping, and increasing or upsizing the electrical system to accommodate all that. And so those upgrades were triggered by new development. So these stations sometimes receive flows from multiple developments. So as those developments have been added, we've anticipated that in the master plan so that we know at a certain point those need to be upgraded. That's now in the capital plan, and that's funded through impact fees. And it's sort of the placeholders that TJ was alluding to. We plan for kind of new and upsizing. So, basically new installation or taking and upsizing the existing mains for sewer reclaim and improvements to lift stations. We anticipate that might occur based upon developments. We have budgeted each year for that. And so we're going to do that again. And it may happen that we don't need to utilize that money. That project doesn't need to occur at that time. It may just, it gets deferred to the future.
We do not anticipate the city of Groveland putting in any mains into a development corridor. This is purely if a developer is partnering and they do it under the terms of the credit agreement. They always have to pay their impact fee for the treatment facility, always, which is at least 60% of that impact fee. So any kind of credit would just be for the piping itself. So I want to be clear why that's even in there is we're not doing this to spark anything. This is if a developer benefits properties beyond their own. And then I mentioned earlier, like Green Valley Commons, what is a strategic lift station that the city would do? That's a strategic lift station that we're participating because it's multiple commercial properties.
Anything else?
Just a couple more slides here. So we just want to talk about in the 26 budget what is currently unfunded, and so really we're just kind of carrying over some of these projects that weren't able to be funded in 25. So that's that $3.5 million worth of bank loan projects. The bank loan wasn't taken, so we're just shifting those over, and we've reprioritized those, and that's the key projects you see listed here. And so in order of priority, we didn't number them, but they are listed in order of priority. And so then we have additional, projects of about $350,000 that we identified that we put into the FY26 budget. Now, if revenues pick up in the way that we anticipate and that we can adjust that total budget, then some of these projects could be funded and could advance. We also have to be cognizant of the number of projects that the city takes on. I mean, it is a long list. There's a backlog. And I think everybody knows that backlog, you have to chew through it. But we have prioritized those so that we can hopefully execute as many as we can. As funding's available and as capacity is available. And some of those projects are pretty important. I mentioned the water treatment plant security enhancements. We also want to constantly improve asset management systems, SCADA improvements at the water plants, and we'd like to design those improvements. And that's a multi-million-dollar project to improve SCADA systems and technology. And then water plant 2 and 3, the interconnect between those two is going to help improve pressure and flows between those two systems. So when we look at things like fire hydrant capacity, fire flow capacity, and pressure, deficiencies that have been identified. So those things were identified in the master plan. These are projects that were put into the capital plan to improve that. I think project. Sorry, $3 million project for that. So some of these projects are fairly significant. That's how we get to $3.5 million, and some of this goes above and beyond that. And then I just want to point out that Ben mentioned that under the FY25 projects there was, I think, 4 SCADA lift station improvements. Yes. So we improved SCADA at 4 lift stations that were the most critical. There's still 14 lift stations that don't have SCADA. And so there's no communication system. A red light goes off, and then hopefully somebody calls. And so we don't have an automatic system to be notified by that. And so those were planned improvements those are costly upgrades that we like to do to improve service. And this is just a continuation of these projects, additional improvements to the system. And as you go down the list here, you kind of get to the lower priorities. We'd like to look at private lift stations citywide. We kind of look at them on a case-by-case basis, so we'd like to do things like that. So I won't belabor that too much. FY26 is additional projects that were in the 26 budget that we then said, all right, well, you know what, these probably should shift to the next year because we shifted some other projects to 26. Now we need to shift some 26 projects to 27, logically. And then as part of that reprioritization. So these are additional projects above and beyond what we just went through. Critical valve replacement. We don't have a full valve replacement program. That's another project that's not even on this list. We'd like to get to a level of sustainable valve replacement, but this hasn't been done historically. So this does have the potential to impact service when we look at, say there's a water main break in the downtown, we look to isolate valves, and we can't operate those valves. We have to go to the next valve down the line. We have to shut off a larger service area, so it impacts more customers. So we'd like to be able to maintain that better. We've mentioned some of this. So the SCADA system improvements, there's also 43 lift stations that we recommend improving the technology. Ben mentioned that these things are just aged and some of them are falling apart. So we'd like to improve the SCADA systems at another 43 stations. And then we have additional projects in 26 that we're recommending that we defer to 28. And this is just kind of for information's sake. This is the capital plan is always something that's evolving. We're trying to reprioritize and shift things. So we think that these projects, while they be nice to have, they can be deferred, and because we don't have much choice, we'd rather prioritize other needs in the city. So these are just an example of additional projects. Anything to add?
I'll just hit this one.
There's a couple wrap-up slides here. So this is the CIP portion of the utility that's funded by utility rates. And so to recap, FY25 was $763,000. FY26 is that 1.37 number that you saw earlier. And then FY27 is projected, and this is based upon the 2024 rate study. And it's not calibrated with revenues that have come in so far. There's been a lot of moving parts to that. And finance could speak to that if there's more questions, I think, to put them on the spot. But FY27, we're anticipating, there was an anticipated revenue increase that would be allocated and directed towards capital projects. So that's what I'm trying to illustrate in these 3 fiscal years. But this budget, just because it's budgeted at $1.6 million, doesn't mean it captures the need, because the need is much more, as we looked at the prior slides. And so, but the positive note is that system revenues are improving. And so we anticipate that these projects can be funded, more projects can be funded in the future on a cash flow basis. And when we look at the factors that affect that, it's rate increases, right? The October rate increase had a profound impact on revenues and adjusted it to support these projects and support the overall capital plan and the rate study. And then we have growth in customers and ERUs. So we just took a snapshot to look at, where does that stand based upon the assumptions that were in the Raftellus rate study. So Raftellus assumed some conservative measure for growth in customers, because that happens, and it happens a lot in Groveland because you have significant growth. But we don't want to overestimate that, because then we overestimate revenue, and then we fall short if we don't have those customers. So in the Raftellus rate study, 10,800 customers were anticipated in FY '25. As of December, there we go. As of December of last year, we exceeded that number by 841. And then as of May, which we're still not done with the fiscal year, we have 11,061 accounts. So these are our irrigation and potable that are off of the potable system. So we have irrigation meters that are associated with the reclaim system, and then we have irrigation meters that are off of the potable system where reclaim is not available. So we just looked at the residential customers that have added to that. So we just captured a snapshot to show that it is in line, those projected numbers are in line with the rate study. So when we look at what is going to contribute to increased revenue in the future. And so this is some information that we just kind of looked at last week. When we look at, so on the left of this bar graph or this chart, you see consumption in gallons. This is how much was sold or consumed by customers. And on the right, we have the revenue associated with that. And you can see about midway through the graph, you see where the orange line exceeds the blue lines. The blue line is the consumption in gallons, and the orange line is the revenue associated with that consumption. So we see the October 2024 is when it spikes. When that orange line spikes is when the revenues jump because of the rate increase. At the same time, if you look at some of these peaks, the revenue associated with the same flow or less is higher overall. So the bottom line is your revenues are now at a level that is above your historic consumption, the revenue at that historic consumption. So this is just reflecting that you have improved revenues overall as a result of the rate increase. It's also, we're tracking that based upon, usage month to month, so usage changes, but overall revenue is higher than it has been for the same period historically. And we could talk a little bit more about that and dissect this further, but I know it's a little bit to chew on, especially at the end of a 2-hour presentation so far. So I think unless, TJ, you want to add something to that, I think it's probably best to move to questions.
It is, and we have one more piece of information that I hope our friends in IT can change out on the screen that was provided by April. That is not part of the presentation directly, but was sent over separately just before the workshop to make sure we had a financial component that met April's liking, because we want to make sure finance gets an opportunity to explain in summary the enterprise fund.
Thank you, TJ. So as TJ mentioned, we're doing this one as opposed on an enterprise fund as a whole. So all of the different funds that we have for the enterprise budget. So if you look in 2022 to 2023, the total activity for the enterprise fund was $11,026,627. For 23-24, we were $13,032,243. So now looking at the current year's budget, we have budgeted for personnel services $1,785,900. For operating expenses, we have $19,982,800. For capital outlay, we have $643,900. Apparently easy for me to say. Debt service of $24,849,100, and then the transfer to the general fund is at $883,500. So year to date through April, for activity, you can see there for personnel services, we're at $930,000. For operating expenses, we're at $4,270,729. Capital outlay, we're at $1,342,833. Debt service is only $6,793, and then the transfer to the general fund is about half at $441,750. For the proposed budget for FY 25-26, you can see the total request for all of these is $45,823,542. So what I will say with that, so for the increase in the personnel services, you're seeing about a 23.9K increase in personnel services. That reflects baseline salaries with no changes in staffing level, no increase in the workers' compensation, but a 10% estimated increase in benefits. So for both the capital outlay, for operating expenses and capital outlay, you see a decrease. The operating expenses is 12.2 million, and the capital outlay is 166.1 million, which is due to a project carry forward. So at this moment, we don't have a good estimate of what is going to, some of these projects, as Rich and them have talked about, are a multi-year projects, right, are multi-year projects. So until we get closer to the end of the year, we won't have a better idea of what of those projects is going to carry forward. So basically, that 10 million that is being looked at is new projects for FY26.
So part of what we will be doing as we wrap up this last quarter of the current budget year is we have drawdown schedules for the big capital projects, whether it's the water main replacement project right here in the neighborhood next to us, changing out all the meters, most of which will be accomplished in this upcoming budget year on both of those. But it's really the Sampe wastewater plant. That's a multi-year. It's going to be this budget year they're getting started, all of this next budget year in 26, all of the next budget year as well before we get into wrap-up mode, and we're not even to a notice to proceed on the water plant to go in at the northern part of the city. So all of those have drawdown schedules that will inform that capital outlay line item. So this is still a work in progress. I want to emphasize that. I think that's the presentation part. We now welcome your questions.
Next time we have such a long presentation, we need to take a break because you lost me 45 minutes ago. Let's talk about the lower aquifer. Do we have any idea what it's going to cost to treat the lower aquifer?
Yes, our initial water quality reports, both on the Sunshine well that's already in at Sunshine as an augmentation well, and then the first water quality report, we're looking really positive. We were very encouraged. There's no obvious substantial increase in treatment costs due to organics or sulfur, any of those things that we had concern about.
Anyone else gone to the lower aquifer at this point? Other cities?
Yes, many of our neighbors already have done at least their first well.
Have you gotten any type of feedback from them with regards to the cost?
We've looked at all the water quality reports, and in fact, the most relevant one close by was Niagara. They have a lower aquifer well.
I'm not looking at quality. I'm looking at what is going to be cost-wise to treat something that we don't have any experience with.
And Rich, you want to speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, so the lower aquifer is a pretty large unit. All right, for once it wasn't me. So there's pretty well-established data for the lower aquifer in the vicinity. So we worked with our subcontractor for hydrogeology that's familiar with that. We looked at testing data for Niagara water, which is within the vicinity of Villa City Wells, and nearby communities. And so it's pretty well documented that the lower aquifer doesn't require a significant level of treatment. Just similar to the upper is it's good water quality in general. So the cost is really disinfection, similar to what you're doing for the upper aquifer.
So I've seen a lot of concerns, and looking at the revised budgets downward on impact fees and otherwise, tell me what happens if I don't collect enough of impact fees? How am I going to pay my revolving loans or otherwise?
So the SRF loans are already committed with existing funds. I don't know if you want to speak to so the majority of the projects that are ongoing now are funded through SRF loans and current impact fees. So impact fees that have already been accounted for and captured that are within the city's budget. They're real monies that are available for that have been pledged.
What type of an increase did we use with regards to single-family residences year after year?
For impact fees or for?
For growth. How many new houses have we budgeted that would actually take into consideration some of these impact fees that would be needed or used?
And I'm doing this from memory, but the Raftella study generally was looking at 500 to 600 homes a year.
500 to 600, and where are we this year? Not that close.
We actually are.
Are we?
We have.
Can I get a report on that? Because I always ask. Okay, and we may be there this year, but with everything that's going on overseas, we don't know how that's going to affect things. So very, very concerning that we've got this amount of debt, and one hiccup could throw us off a kilter.
So the SRF loans are financed based upon the existing rate base and the current impact fees. So when we look at the impact fee budgets that I summarized, it is a little bit misleading to say that, we're not utilizing the money, the project didn't need to be done, but the money wasn't collected for the development that was due to transpire. And so that we set aside a budget amount in anticipation of projects, and we would then initiate those projects based upon the revenue that's available.
Are we going to see any more budgeting on the enterprise fund? Because in the past, we would see a list of all the projects, and then next to it, it would say funded by rates, funded by impact fees and whatnot, funded by discretionary monies. Are we going to get something similar to that? Because I don't think I saw something that would make my stomach feel better.
On the capital projects that were presented earlier, the ones that you know well at this point, water meters, water main, Sampe plant, water plant, we do include in all that the funding sources attributed. And, one of my favorites, of course, is the Villa City water treatment plant yet to be built. It was anticipated to be based on water rates and impact fees, and now it's grant funded. So that's offsetting burden on the existing customers.
Okay. Earlier, we talked about the provision of services, and you were very, very happy with the way that it had worked out. One said over 7 years, I think, they had in order to do anything. In the verbiage, if you go back, my question is that generous, or can we be more stringent upon it? And the reason I'm saying that is, like, for instance, we tied up $500,000 up at the hotels in economic incentives. I know it's a different story, but I'm looking at the same type of general principle. How long am I going to tie up, whether it be capacity or otherwise, without actually having any monies on it?
Yeah, part of our concurrency management and capacity management is being able to look at, you've got different levels of what could be vesting of any level. And that would be, we start off with reserving, and that reservation typically has a deadline. And at some point, if you haven't purchased it, it's not yours and you don't get to claim it any longer. And that's part of our new business model with development agreements.
Offline, TJ, can you get me what it costs to take 1 gallon of Mascot reclaimed versus what we sell it at? And I'm talking
Yes.
treatment.
Yes, I'll be happy to share that with you in the council.
All right. Trinity Lakes, you're talking about them putting in the new lines up to Sunshine?
Yes.
Okay. That's going up State Road 19?
Yes, sir.
So what happens to all that nice new pavement that was just put in? It's going to get ripped up?
No. No, we also, as a city of Groveland, are required to get a DOT right-of-way permit. The work will be done in the eastern right-of-way, not affecting the existing pavement whatsoever. The biggest concern we have is just making sure maintenance of traffic is considerate of Groveland's needs.
And the last question, did I ask this already? Who else has the requirement to go to the lower aquifer? What other cities? Did I ask that?
Just about every community in South Lake County, yeah.
All right, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Mike?
Thank you. Just kind of on a little different track. TJ, you were talking about Wawa wanting to put in their own private lift station. Let me ask you something. When they come and they ask that, is that a cost differential? They're like, they think they can put it in cheaper than the city, they can run it cheaper. Why do they think that rather than asking the city to come in and take on that, I hate to use the word burden, but that responsibility?
That's a wonderful question. So the way I'll answer that particular case is that Wawa learned that the parcel that they were looking at purchasing was actually subject to an overall master development approval that has a private lift station. And they said, we're not sharing a private lift station, we'll do our own. We said, engineering-wise, that doesn't work for us. Now you've got competing pressures of 2 lift stations nearby that are not optimal for the city of Groveland. We'd like to further discuss and gravitated them toward a master lift station that would be public. So it was really just a logical conclusion once we talked through all the issues.
And we're going to jump forward a slides. And you were talking about, there were no projects that were rolled forward in '25. They've been delayed to 2026, am I correct?
So that was just for projects that were funded by impact fees. So those are really just projects addressing new development. So
Okay.
if the city didn't have an obligation to serve utilities for that new development, outside of that development footprint, or we anticipated in the budget that there might be a need for that. And so we looked at the need for utility revenues, impact fee revenues, sorry, and that really kind of informed the rate study, these capital projects that informed the rate study so that we could set the rate for impact fees, or set the impact fees appropriately to reflect that. So essentially that those new developments would pay for those projects themselves through the impact fee program and potentially get credit for what was in the city right away. What's within their development is their responsibility no matter what. This is city infrastructure that we're trying to budget for if we had to extend the pipeline or we had to upsize it, that would be reflected in the impact fees that they'd be paying into. If the
Okay.
development didn't occur, then we wouldn't need to do the project.
Thank you. Did I miss it? Okay, so then there was another slide that said these are the projects that we're putting on the slate for 2026. And I read them, we looked at them, and I counted, and there were 14. So are those 14 part of that 19 that was rolling forward? And if so, what are the 5 that didn't move forward out of the 19? Am I correct on that slide, or did I misinterpret your slide?
Yeah, well, we're trying to pull up the slide right now.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So yeah, we'll go to that so we're clear. If you just put it into presentation mode, I'll find it real quick. I think, let's see, those are impact, sewer impact. So this is where we talk about bank loan deferred projects. So that, in a prior slide, that 3.5 million was 19 projects. And so you counted 14 here, or 15 here?
Well, you've got 2 slides, so you've got, I think, however many, under the key projects, and then I think the next page added some more to it, and I think it was 14. So I was just curious, and this may not be the right slide, but anyway. I was just curious, out of the 19 that were rolling forward, what 5 might have been bypassed and for what reasons?
So I just listed the key projects. I didn't list all of them. So the 19 is really part of this overall, kind of deferred or delayed projects. I just didn't list all 19.
Okay.
Yeah, the key projects were kind of the more significant ones. So when we say 19 projects, some of them are really small.
Okay.
Some of them are equipment, kind of project, but it's capital.
I was doing the numbers on it. I was
it's
curious if something had gotten left out and why it might have been, left off, so.
Yep.
I think I'm good right now. Thank you.
A question about Sampi. If you said we're at 109% capacity right now, if we switch over the water mains to Sunshine, the ones that we can, it reduces it to 99%. Are we going to be functional through the current expansion? Are we going to be able to make it to that point where we get that project complete?
Yeah, I'll let Ben speak to the fact he operates it every day, but yes.
Yeah, so we do hit that 1.5 safety factor in there. Taking off the 120,000, it will give us that while the project's being built at 18 months to 24 months is the anticipated construction. So we do hit that safety factor in there that we're relying on in the meantime.
It's a difference between permitted capacity, right? Permitted capacity is what DEP says the facility should handle kind of on a normal average day or average month basis, which is the 0.99 that we've always referred to of being at 100% capacity. But the facility itself can actually process more per day or during peaks, wet weather, things like that. So that's what Ben's referring to of that buffer, that 0.5 buffer, where we have some buffer while the new facility is being put online.
Okay. And I think.
I understood that you're going into phase 4 for the replacement of the iron pipes. And I'd like to know what percentage of pipes have been replaced and how many phases are there?
Right now, there have been two phases starting at the top of the hill at Anderson Road. The first one centered around the Iowa Street area of our historic neighborhood. The second phase was around Sunset Street. The third phase is what's happening right now this month, this year. That's phase 3, and that is basically Beach, Waldo, all the way to Magnolia, from Ohio Street next to 33, all the way here to Lake Avenue. And then phase 4, which has been deferred, but still needing to be designed, would be moving to Cherry, Orange, Broad Street, Crittenden Street to handle what we call the downtown area. That would be your phase 4. And then other phases could be defined, older infrastructure toward Mascot, also toward the Gadsden Street neighborhood, and Curtis Avenue area that are all older, next to the Public Safety Building, that's an older neighborhood. But right now, we've only defined through designing through phase 3, and then we know that phase 4 would be this area where we sit down.
Okay, so through phase 3, can you give me an approximation of the percentage of the iron pipes that have been replaced?
For that versus citywide, I would say phase 3 is probably completing close to 60 to 70%, if not more. Of the older pipe, yeah. So within that, one of the factors that made it eligible for SRF funding is the fact that it's old, it's iron pipe, but it's also, there is a little bit of asbestos-containing material pipe. Asbestos was used in manufacturing of pipe materials to strengthen it. And so that is advantageous from the standpoint that the DEP wants you to not use it anymore. So we're replacing that system. And so that asbestos portion, phase 3 is the last remaining amount of asbestos pipe to be replaced. And that was about less than 5% of that project, phase 3.
Okay, so just to make sure that I have an enhanced understanding, from phase 1 through 3, approximately 60% of the iron pipes have been replaced.
We can give you a better number, but that's just a kind of rough guess from what we've done so far. The reason we didn't schedule phase 4 yet was because a lot of that is within the State Route 50 corridor, the relocation corridor. So knowing as that project approached, we would do more detailed planning for that replacement project, implement phase 3 so it's outside of that corridor. And you want to phase pipe replacement in downtown areas because it's disruptive. And when State Route 50 is relocated, we would do phase 4. So phase 4 is still yet to be designed, and that's in the capital plan to do so.
So phase 4 would be approximately 40%?
We'd like to get you a better number.
Okay.
But that's probably
TJ,
in the
would you give me a
ballpark.
better number?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Hey, just a few questions, and I'm sorry if they're redundant. In the upgrades of, you said we're using some impact fees for upgrades in areas only where new development impacts those items. Is that correct? So impact fees are only going to be used to upgrade items that new development has impacted? That's correct?
Yeah, so impact fees, in order to use impact fees, there has to be a growth component to the project. In some cases, we've split that cost amongst existing ratepayers because it is an enhancement and replacement of the system, but it's also an upgrade at the same time. So we use a rationale that was developed during the master plan and the capital finance plan to see sometimes it's a portion of that, it's impact fees, sometimes it's 100%. Depends on the nature of the project. So if it's purely growth-driven, it's 100% impact fees.
Okay, so it's structured, so your repair and enhancement, when you're putting it in and it benefits the guests or the residents already here, you split that out?
Yes.
Okay.
So for example, upgrading an 8-inch pipe to a 12-inch pipe to accommodate more growth, right? A portion of that would be to replace the existing 8-inch to serve the existing customers, 12-inch to upsize to new customers.
Okay. Ballpark, what is the cost of the north waste treatment plant?
We used a grand total in the study that supported the impact fees in the rate structure of $70 million for a phase 1.
So we have 170 million, and so is the rest of that, and then you had 20 million from a grant, right? So
There is, yes.
what's, the rest is Sampe? The Sampe is, who would that be? Another 100 million for Sampe?
We have not put in the budget the full cost of that northern plant as it still is yet to be designed. So that would be a process that we would get a formal cost estimate based on design, not just planning numbers. So it would be an engineering cost estimate at that point. And
But is that cost not in the budget? Would I see 170, what, that, rolling forward?
the SOFI grant was the only thing that we included, as that's in hand that we're working towards securing now, that's been allocated to the city of Groveland, but now we have to do the prerequisites with DEP to be able to secure that grant. And so that is the only thing, is that planning and design. There are no construction dollars budgeted, although it was built into the rate structure and the impact fees.
So totally just ballpark, Sampe, once it's expanded, will accommodate how many households or how many units? We
Well,
got
so-
11,000 now, right? Is that what you said? And so if we put it, what's the new part on there is
So
8/10?
11,000 was residential meters citywide, so that's water meters. So when we look at within the Sampe service area, there's a different number that I don't have in front of me, but that would be, service area customers for Sampe. Ben, looks like Ben might be doing some math. The expansion project is to address the existing commitments that are already in the queue. And part of that is it's reached capacity with those commitments.
Yeah,
And I think we can give you a better number for that. That's part of the facility plan project we're looking at, is all those existing capacities.
yeah, I'm just trying to get at that if we are building a mirror site beside the one we have now, or a mirror site that's 0.8% or 80% of what it is now, and now is, say, 8,500, and we have another 60, that's 14,000. What is the, and then you have the capacity for Sunshine right now, right? And what I'm trying to get at is with the new expansion, what is the total amount of units that the new plus Sunshine can accommodate? That's all, before we add a northern plant on there.
So the Sampe plant, the other thing that they consider with Sampe is that you have the mascot commitment. So right now, only 50,000 gallons of that flow is going there to the plant. That's at 100% capacity. So we're going to increase it by 0.67 MGD, but another 0.275 of that is strictly associated with mascot capacity. So that we have to reserve that capacity because they purchased that. That's going to be allocated for mascot. Now, existing developments within the downtown Groveland that have already been committed under construction or anticipated to be flowing to that, like Cypress Bluff, those are going to eat up that additional capacity. So we're going to eat up that additional 0.67 MGD with those projects and mascot commitments. Now, the northern plant, which is going to handle, Sunshine, is going to handle flows from Trinity Lakes, remaining phases, and then developments that are committed within that area. So we got a list of developments, Rainwood being one of them, additional developments along 27, and what's already been approved. And so that is going to eat up what we think is most of the remaining capacity of Sunshine.
Yeah.
Now, we don't want to run plants at 100%. So we're looking at, we want to meet a target of 80% capacity for those.
I understand. I need
Yeah.
maybe some help. You're a good translator for me. If we have, I just want to know how much capacity we have now in numbers. I don't care about mascot. I don't care. It's flow through the plant. And how much we have before we add on the new northern plant. And then the $100 million plant, what is that? Because I think we've all discussed that doesn't even take care of Villa City, right? With the new northern plant for the next 100 million doesn't take care of the Villa City project. Because I really want us all to understand where we're going. And when we start taking out loans for this, it means we've got to have 95,000 people in this city in order to pay for it. When you take out that kind of thing in advance, you've got to be able to pay it back. It's the pig and the python, right? And those are the kind of things I think that we need to discuss. Not tonight, we've already been here 3 hours, but I think as we're talking through expansion, that should be part of it. And I think we really need to talk about density in this city because density adds to this issue quite a bit.
So Mayor, I think one of the things that I heard maybe maybe you didn't, because it is a little bit difficult, is the capacity at Sampy is going to be aided by Trinity Lakes going up north. So trying to figure out capacity side by side is a little bit of a moving puzzle right now, because we don't know, well, actually, you know, how much is actually going to be relieved on Sampy by taking 500 homes and going up north? How much capacity is relieved? So that's one thing you need to look at. The other thing is, you know, you can't just look at it in the number of houses. You got to look at it equivalent residential units, because not all the capacity that's going to be at the, where, Sampy, is going to be houses, is going to be businesses and otherwise. So I think you also need to look at it from that perspective. So if you have any type of metrics that's going to say that that expansion after the Trinity Lakes goes up, this is what I'm going to have left, this is what I'm going to have left for businesses, this is what I'm going to have left for any new homes, and there shouldn't be too many new homes going in the downtown area. What are the new subdivisions are going to be going? Oh, I forgot, yeah, the one down by the South Lake Regional Park. That's the
Yes.
biggest subdivision.
Yes.
Yeah, but that was freed up when we basically said to Southeastern, you're not going to be going to our unit anymore. So we freed up capacity with that.
With our phase one. And I think the mayor hit it directly on the head of the nail, that what we're now delving into in this conversation warrants a workshop all of its own.
Right.
There's a lot of work that's already been put into it, continuing, and the details are important. When Sampy is complete, it's not what it environmentally can handle, it's the permitted capacity that DEP, and although it's a mirror image that's being constructed of the modern plant, our permitted capacity is likely to be 1.67 million gallons a day, not necessarily 2 million. And we'll have to manage that capacity, just as we're doing at the Sunshine Plant. So I will tell you, if I'm approached to staff today with anyone proposing a new development with a new development agreement, we don't have capacity for you right now. We're working on that.
I don't want to hijack the question, but when we talk about capacity, and I forgot what the other one is, but you're talking about biological capacity, and what's the other capacity?
Permitted.
Permitting, okay. And those two are often different, because you told me that.
Hydraulic
You
and
told me that.
biological, yeah.
Right, yeah, so.
Yeah.
Then the last thing, maybe we can talk about it at the next council meeting, but what's the format for these presentations? I'd like to see a spreadsheet, a Gantt chart. It would be a lot quicker to go through on these projects and stuff, and that's just me. But at some point, I think we need to, because there's a lot of information here, but there's not a lot of detail, you know, on how, what's the cost of a crane truck, you know, that kind of stuff. So that could be, maybe we bring it up for consensus at the next meeting to have a solid, consistent presentation format. Hey, we go back around. Anybody else? No? We answer any questions for you?
To your point, this format was what we thought was somewhat digestible. It's a lot of information. We understand that. The spreadsheet, we do have a backup spreadsheet that is the basis of all this. So I've been managing that with TJ and the O&M team and finance. We just didn't present that because it's also a pretty cumbersome spreadsheet. But I think the budget amendments for 25 and proposed 26 will provide that detail. And that'll be upcoming meetings.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing. It's just me. I think that if I had the chart and the spreadsheet, we could have got a lot more detail out of 3 hours than we have now. I have a lot of questions, which I can ask the city manager. That's what, on Thursday, so. So with that, then we'll go ahead and any input, Mr. Hine, anything? Okay, with that, it's 9:03 and we'll adjourn the meeting.